Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Member for Wundanyi. Member for Wundanyi, Honorable Dan Mwashako. Very well. Proceed to the next order.
Order number 5, papers.
Honorable Asheli.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Wednesday, March 20th, 2019. 1, reports of the Auditor General on the financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year ending 30th June 2017 and the certificates therein. A, Egerton University. B, Kisumu West Constituency. C, Awendo Constituency. D, Kitutu Chache South Constituency. Report number 2, Honorable Speaker, is report from the Auditor General on the financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year ending 30th June 2018 and the certificates therein. A, Judicial Service Commission. B, Kirinyaga University. C, Karatina University. D, Office of the Controller of Budget. E, outstanding obligations guaranteed by the Kenya government. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Member for Kangema.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion: that aware of our ethnic, cultural, religious diversity as recognized by the Constitution, further aware that Article 27, Sub-Article 4 of the Constitution provides that the state shall not discriminate directly or indirectly against any person on any ground, including religion, noting that Article 32 of the Constitution provides that every person has the right to freedom of religion, cognizant of the fact that the rights and freedoms under Articles 27 and 32 of the Constitution are not absolute, but are rights and freedoms that can be limited, concerned that the country has been experiencing a proliferation and the emergence of cults and sects under the guise of religious institutions. Further, concerned that the general public and the revenue collections agencies have often fallen prey to fraudulent and unscrupulous persons acting as religious leaders. Also concerned that the growth of these religious institutions remain largely unregulated, including on matters such as their registration, standards of operation, requirements for establishment, appointment, and qualifications for religious leaders, among other things. This House resolves that the Office of the Attorney General, Roman 1, forthwith undertakes an audit of all religious institutions in Kenya, including examining their bank accounts and the qualifications of the religious leaders with a view to formulating self-regulatory mechanisms. And the Roman 2 submits a report to this House on the audit within 90 days of the passage of the motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Other members, before we proceed to the next order, allow me to recognize the pupils from the following institutions in the Speaker's Gallery: from Kikuyu Township Primary School, Kikuyu Constituency, Kiambu County, and those from Orbit School of the Cross from Embakasi East Constituency, Nairobi County. They are welcome to observe proceedings in the House. Next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
First question is by the member for Kakamega County, Honorable Elsie Muhanda.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for granting me the opportunity to ask the following question number 012/2019. Is the Cabinet Secretary of Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs aware that the schools in Butere, Nabaholo, Mumias West, and Malaba constituencies in Kakamega County did not receive sanitary towels in the financial year 2017-2018? And what measures has the ministry put in place to ensure that the said schools are provided with the sanitary towels? And further, that all public schools across the country are supplied with sanitary towels on time? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Referred to the Committee on Education and Research. Next question is by the Honorable Janet Nangabo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on question 127 of 2019. Mr. Speaker, my question goes to a Departmental Committee of Defense and Foreign Relations.
No, the question must be going to the Cabinet Secretary.
To the Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, number 1, is the Cabinet Secretary aware of fresh claims of abuse of the migrants in the Middle East, leading to the loss of lives? Number 2, what is the status of bilateral labor agreements which the Middle Eastern countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia regarding the safety of Kenyans migrant workers? Number 3, what measures has the ministry put in place to ensure that the safety of migrant workers, recruiting agencies and licensed by the ministry, and that Kenya seeking employment in the Middle East to do so through licensed and registered recruiting agencies and through the Ministry of Labor? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, this is a clear case where your question is misdirected. Even bilateral labor agreements are not done by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This question should be directed to the Cabinet Secretary for Labor and Social Protection. Honorable Nangabo, your question is misdirected. But be that as it may, I direct that this question be transmitted to the Cabinet Secretary for Labor and Social Protection, not to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They will not know anything about the issues you have raised here. Because even from the question itself, you're still talking about agencies or through the Ministry of Labor. So how does the Ministry of Foreign Affairs respond to this? Honorable Nangabo, you want to say something? Or you still wanted to go to Foreign Affairs? Give her.
Mr. Speaker, I stand guided.
Very well. For you to get a proper answer, I think this question should be answered by the Cabinet Secretary for Labor and Social Protection. And therefore, the committee to which the question will, which is directed to organize itself and prioritize is the Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. The clerk's department is accordingly directed. The next question was to be asked by the member for West Mugirango, who has already written to communicate his inability to be present in the chamber this afternoon. The question is therefore deferred. Next question is by the Honorable Danita Gatti.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I seek to ask question number 130 of 2019 to the Cabinet Secretary for Labor and Social Protection. 1, what is the criteria used in determining the beneficiaries of the Persons with Severe Disabilities Fund in this country? 2, could the Cabinet Secretary provide the number of beneficiaries under the program in the financial years 2015-2016, 2016-2017, and 2017-2018, and the amounts paid to each? Number 3, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that the beneficiaries of this fund in Kuria East constituency and Kuria West constituency have not been paid this fund in the last 6 months? Number 4, could the Cabinet Secretary explain how households with more than one person with severe disabilities are facilitated to receive these funds under the cash transfer program? I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Question referred to the Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare to prioritize the appearance of the Cabinet Secretary. Next order.
Order number 8, procedural motion, limitation of debate on business under Standing Order 146.
Majority Whip.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I raise to move a procedural motion that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 97-1, the House orders that each speech in the general debate contemplated under Standing Order number 146 be limited as follows: a maximum of 1 hour and 30 minutes, with not more than 15 minutes for the mover in moving, 15 minutes for the chairperson of the relevant departmental committee, and 5 minutes for any other member speaking, including the leader of majority party and the leader of minority party. And that 5 minutes before the expiry of the time, the mover shall be called upon to reply, and further that priority in speaking shall be accorded to the leader of majority party and the leader of minority party and the chairperson of the relevant departmental committee in that order. Mr. Speaker, I want to invite members on Standing Order number 146, and these standing orders give us opportunity, Honorable Speaker, to amend our own rules, procedures. Honorable Speaker, the bills we are talking about under 146 are actually bills that have been originated in the National Assembly and exhaustively discussed and referred to the Senate. And in the course of the debate in the Senate, there could be some amendments here, 1 or 2 amendments. Therefore, these are bills that generally we have had opportunity to debate. And according to the House business and the meeting yesterday, Honorable Speaker, the one that I attended, and I'm happy, the minority here, minority leader also attended. We agreed that since the bills have been exhaustively debated in the National Assembly, we can only look at the amendments and whether they would help that bill. And that's why, Honorable Speaker, we have decided as a house business to propose to the Committee of the Whole House that instead of taking the entire period that we discuss other bills, we should reduce so that we can have business to look at other bills. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, now that our minority the chair of budget is confusing me. Honorable Speaker, now that we were in this meeting with the Honorable John Buddy, Minority Party Leader and MP for Suba South, I would move this motion and request him to second. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Mbandi?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think this House has made a decision in the past to limit debates and define how long we need to take on other bills and motions, but we did not consider cases where a bill which has been passed by this House and forwarded to the Senate for concurrence is returned from the Senate with amendments. It was open-ended that we could debate that bill even forever. But Mr. Speaker, now the House Business Committee decided to look at it again and limit debate to 1.5 hours maximum, and with just 15 minutes to move and reply, and the other members, including both leaders of the minority and the majority, to take 5 minutes each. This is basically a procedural motion, and we are asking this House for concurrence, and so I second.
Other members, I can see, I think getting to understand the standing order is still becoming problematic. The question must be proposed first. So, other members, I propose the question. This is that pursuant to provision of standing order number 97(1), this House orders that each speech in the general debate contemplated under standing order 146, which is consideration of Senate amendments to bills originating in the National Assembly, be limited as follows: a maximum of 1.5 hours, with not more than 15 minutes for the mover in moving, 15 minutes for the chairperson of the relevant departmental committee, and 5 minutes for any other member speaking, including the leader of the majority party, leader of the minority party, if the bill is not a party-sponsored bill, and that 5 minutes before the expiry of the time, the mover shall be called upon to reply, and further, that priority in speaking shall be according to the leader of the majority party, the leader of the minority party, and the chairperson of the relevant departmental committee in that order. Well, it seems to be the desire of the House that now I put the question. But I hope honourable members do appreciate why this decision has been made. It's just to limit debate when it's just considering amendments, so that we don't spend unnecessarily too long debating only amendments. I put the question, which is that pursuant to the provision of standing order number 97(1), this House orders that each speech in the general debate contemplated under standing order number 146, consideration of Senate amendments to bills originating in the National Assembly, be limited as follows: a maximum of 1 hour and 30 minutes, which is 1 hour and 1.5 hours, with not more than 15 minutes for the mover in moving, 15 minutes for the chairperson of the relevant departmental committee, and 5 minutes for any other member speaking, including the leader of the majority party and the leader of the minority party, if the bill is not a party-sponsored bill, and that 5 minutes before the expiry of the time, the mover shall be called upon to reply, and further that priority in speaking shall be according to the leader of the majority party, the leader of the minority party, and the chairperson of the relevant departmental committee in that order. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say no? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, special motion, Report on the vetting of the nominee for appointment as the Cabinet Secretary for Education.
Honorable John Bandi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the following motion. That taking into consideration the findings of the Committee on Appointments in its report on the vetting of the nominee for approval as the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Education laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, March 19, 2019, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 152(2) of the Constitution and Section 3 and 5 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, this House approves the appointment of Professor George Albert Omore Magoha as the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Education. Mr. Speaker, on 1st of March 2019, His Excellency the President forwarded to the National Assembly for consideration and approval the notification of nomination of Professor George Albert Omore Magoha as the Cabinet Secretary for Education. This was in accordance with the provisions of Article 152(2) of the Constitution and Section 5 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approvals Act of 2011. And Mr. Speaker, pursuant to our standing orders number 42(1), the name and CV of the nominee was referred to the Committee on Appointments on 5th March 2019 for vetting and reporting to the House within 14 days as the law requires. Mr. Speaker, on Wednesday, 6th March 2019, the Clerk of the National Assembly wrote to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA, the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, the Higher Education Loans Board, and the Register of Political Parties requesting for reports with respect to the nominee on a number of areas, including ethics and integrity of the nominee, his tax compliance, criminal records, higher education loan repayments, and finally, political affiliations. And Mr. Speaker, on Thursday, 7th March 2019, pursuant to Section 6(3) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, the clerk in writing invited the nominee for the approval hearing, indicating the time and place for holding the approval hearing. And Mr. Speaker, we actually as a committee did receive clearance reports for the nominee from Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, which I think came on 1st of March, dated 1st of March, Kenya Revenue Authority, the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, and the Higher Education Loans Board, and finally, the Registrar of Political Parties. The committee held 4 sittings, and the nominee appeared before it on 14th of March 2019, and was vetted in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act of 2011, and the National Assembly standing orders on his suitability or otherwise for the appointment as a Cabinet Secretary. I wanted to mention that the reports that we got from EACC, Kenya Revenue Authority was very categorical that they didn't have any issue regarding any outstanding tax arrears or tax to be paid. The Directorate of Criminal Investigations was also very clear on the criminal records, that they had nothing in their records to indicate that the nominee had any previously known criminal record. The same with EACC, which gave opinion that at that time they had no recorded case of any investigation regarding the nominee. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Section 7 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approvals Act of 2011, the committee did consider various issues during the approval hearing. First, the committee considered the procedure used to arrive at the nominee. The committee observed that Article 152(2) of the Constitution that provides on how cabinet secretaries should be nominated is a constitutional prerogative of the president, and there is no further procedure prescribed in the Constitution or any statute law. The President has the express prerogative to appoint whoever he thinks can hold the position of a cabinet secretary. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution, in addition, sets out certain requirements regarding the appointment of persons to public office. If you go to Article 27(8) of the Constitution, it provides that the state shall take legislative and other measures to implement the principle that not more than 2/3 of the members of elective or appointee bodies shall be of the same gender. Mr. Speaker, Article 130, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution provides that the composition of the national executive shall reflect the regional and ethnic diversity of the people of Kenya. The committee observed that the nominee hails from Siaya County or was born in Siaya County. And Mr. Speaker, that the Constitution contemplates a maximum of 22 cabinet secretaries, whereas the country is comprised of 47 counties in terms of Article 6(1), as read with the first schedule to the Constitution. In view of the limited numbers of persons who can be appointed to the cabinet, a maximum of 22, it would not be possible to have cabinet secretaries who hail from each and every from all the counties in the country. Article 232(1), Roman 1 and Roman 3 of the Constitution provides that the values and principles of public service include affording adequate and equal opportunities for appointments, training and advancement at all levels of the public service of persons with disabilities. And further, Article 54(2) of the Constitution mandates the state to ensure the progressive realization on the principle that at least 5% of the members of the public in appointive bodies are persons with disability. And Mr. Speaker, sir, Article 55 of the Constitution mandates the state to take measures, including affirmative action, to ensure that the youth have opportunities to associate, be represented, and participate in political, social, and economic spheres of life. Further, Article 260 of the Constitution defines a youth as a person who has attained the age of 18 years but has not attained the age of 35 years. Mr. Speaker, the committee, in determining the suitability of the nominee, took into consideration the provisions on leadership and integrity as outlined under Chapter 6 of the Constitution. Further, the committee observed that suitability of the nominee should be evaluated holistically, taking into account the nominee's academic credential, professional training, experience, background, and personal qualities, as well as the performance of the nominee during the approval hearing. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to the provisions of Section 6(9) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary, the Clerk of the National Assembly placed an advertisement in the print media on Thursday, 7th March 2019, inviting the public to submit memoranda by way of written statements on oath or in form of affidavits on the suitability or otherwise of the nominee. The advertisements indicated that by close of business on Wednesday, 13th March 2019, at 5 p.m., the committee had not received any statements on oath in respect of the nominee, whether adversely or even a positive statement. Mr. Speaker, the nominee made the following general observation. That number one, in accordance with Article 78(1) and 2 of the Constitution, he is all aware that for you to hold a state office, you must not be someone who holds dual citizenship. So the nominee was found not to be holding dual citizenship. He is a Kenyan, and that is all. He was a Kenyan born in Siaya County. Number two, that is a professor of surgery at the University of Nairobi with well over 31 years experience in academia, public service, 10 years of which he served as a vice chancellor at the University of Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I worked with him at the University of Nairobi. I can hear Honorable Pukose asking as a student. Students don't work. I of course learned at the University of Nairobi, but again worked at the University of Nairobi. Yes, and Honorable Sankok knows. Prior to his nomination, he was serving as a chairperson at the Kenya National Examination Council, where the committee felt that he reformed the examination management, thereby giving credibility and integrity to the exam results in the country. In fact, during the interview, we talked of before this time, before he joined NEC, or Kenya National Examination Council, and between around 1998 to that period, there were basically no exams in this country. He made a shocking revelation that this country has been having 2 exams set, exam for this year and exam for the next year. And the exams could be leaked easily and could be bought at will. His academic credential, Mr. Speaker, and professional training and experience comply with Section 6, subsection 7 of the Public Appointments and Parliamentary Approval Act, number 33 of 2011. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the nominee even had confidence of his colleagues at the University of Nairobi who elected him as the dean of the faculty before he was elevated to become a principal. And then later, after I think just about 1 year, he was again promoted to the position of Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration and Finance. And finally, he became the Vice Chancellor of the university for 10 years. Mr. Speaker, number 3, we observed that he meets the requirements of Chapter 6 of the Constitution on leadership and integrity. The committee further observed that the EACC, KRA, DCI, and of course the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, and even Higher Education Loans Board had sent clearance letters with respect to the nominee. Mr. Speaker, the MP for Suna East is so agitated here. He's excited, actually. The nominee has not been charged in a court of law in the last 3 years. Number 4, that as stipulated in Article 75(1) of the Constitution, he has no potential conflict of interest. Number 5, that he satisfies the requirements of Article 77(1) of the Constitution in that he does not intend to participate in any other gainful employment during his tenure as a cabinet secretary. Number 6, that he does not hold office in any political party and hence satisfies the provisions of Article 77(2) of the Constitution. Number 7, that he has never been dismissed from office under Article 75 of the Constitution for contravention of the provisions of Article 75(1), that is conflict of interest, or Article 76, which is talking about financial probity, or Article 77, which talks about restriction on activities of state officers, and Article 78(2), dual citizenship of the Constitution, and is therefore fit to hold office as cabinet secretary. That he has exhibited substantial knowledge on issues education and experience in public service. Mr. Speaker, I remember some members felt that we should say that he has exhibited immense, actually I think that was the word, immense, but I think members were careful to say that he exhibited substantial knowledge on issues, education, and experience in public service. Mr. Speaker, as I wind up, I wanted to mention that this nominee appeared before us and we interviewed him for, well, I think over almost 3 hours. And during that time of the interview, I think he took us through his history in terms of education from primary school. He's someone we can easily trace his education life from primary school to the time he became a professor in this country. He has served this country even in public offices. In fact, Mr. Speaker, when the nominee was made the Vice Chancellor of the University of Nairobi, those of us who can remember, there was a lot of turmoil at the University of Nairobi that time. The students kept on going on strike over so many issues. But his period, I think, has been the most peaceful. Has been the most peaceful period in the history of the University of Nairobi. I'll talk about his age shortly. So his tenure at the University of Nairobi, I think, is characterized by peaceful coexistence between the students and the university management. And I think that exhibits that he is a very strong leader in terms of networking and his management skills. The work that he has done in Kenya National Examination Council also speaks for itself for the period that he has been there. Although, Mr. Speaker, again, some of us, and I think many Kenyans have also asked this question, that maybe some people think that he has a very strong hand in terms of managing the institutions he has worked in. In fact, I remember I personally asked him whether he is not mechanical in his way of dealing with issues. And we had expressed this because we know that he's going to deal with very difficult, so to speak, and at the risk of agitating my colleagues, the Honorable Sosion, who heads NAT, and also the COPET chair, Honorable Moko Mulemba, and I want to be very careful because they are my friends. I know how dealing with them can be a challenge. And we asked the nominee how he will handle the situation, and he said, he gave us assurance that he does a lot of background and consultations before he even takes action on matters that are monumental, matters are of serious concern to the country. There are people who are questioning his interpersonal skills. But again, Mr. Speaker, really, we must also be aware that, you know, when you become a reading all the way to become a professor makes you appreciate certain things that may make you come out like, you know, you may appear arrogant and you are not. Actually, I've heard many people call others arrogant, and when you look at it critically, you realize that probably these people just know a lot and know too much beyond what probably other people know, and then you think it is arrogance. But we again urged the nominee that when he gets this appointment, I think it will require a lot of interpersonal skills in dealing with not only the teachers, he will be dealing with their unions, and he will be dealing even with TSC, and he will be dealing with the children of this country, which is, the children is a very soft section of our society. So, Mr. Speaker, really, looking at his experience, his education, academic qualification, his level of education, and he's really widely traveled, Mr. Speaker. I think that is also something that really shocked us. I can hear one honorable member, I'm not going to mention, ask, how will that help? You must also be exposed, Mr. Speaker. You cannot just be someone who moves from Migori to Nairobi and for 20 years and then you think you know so much. Yeah, you must at least have some knowledge of what happens elsewhere. Someone asked, although informally, that what is the age? Professor Magoha was born in 1952. My calculation brings it to about 67 years. And I think, if you ask me, 67, sometimes just like wine, people get mature also with age in terms of leadership. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, some ministries, like Ministry of Education, where you are going to deal with the children, you are going to deal with the teachers, you are going to deal with the different categories of people. You know, at least the beauty of being elderly is that you have experience of both. Of being youthful, you have at least passed the youth, you are also elderly. But the youth only know how to deal with the youth because they have never been elderly. In that case, I think you need someone really mature. In fact, I'm someone who is asking that probably in future we may make sure that the president of this country should not be below 60 years. You should be 60 years and above to be president. You know, there are positions you can play around with.
these positions where we can have the youth, and positions where we need maturity to be able to handle the pressures of life. You know, if you are put in some positions where you are still thinking of how to have more children, Mr. Speaker, it is a big challenge. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I just want to urge members to read the comprehensive report of the Committee on Appointments in order to fully appreciate and enrich the debates. I further urge the members to adopt the recommendations of the committee as contained in the report, but this report was unanimously adopted and approved by all members of the committee present. Even those absent actually sent a word that they support. Those who did not attend, the heard of any member against or disagreed with the report, the findings of the committee. And so, Mr. Speaker, I move, and I want to ask the deputy leader of majority, for obvious reasons, to second. I would have asked the whip, but I want to ask the deputy leader of majority for some very good reasons, Mr. Speaker.
What is your point of order, Honorable Omboko Milemba?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The leader of minority has done well in profiling Professor Magoha, but towards the end, he alludes to the fact that in future, he wants this country to have presidents who are 60 years and above. Is he doubting the performance of the existing presidents today who are not?
I want to just educate you a bit. That is not a point of order. So you are the one who is out of order. Honorable Jimmy Angwenyi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me a chance to second this, this motion. Mr. Speaker, I thank God that I was able to be a member of the committee vetting this highly qualified Kenyan. You have been told how he has qualified in every aspect required by the Act and the Constitution. But he did not say one thing or two things. One, I found that Professor Magoha, son of Magoha, because he kept on saying, I'm Magoha, son of Magoha. He showed concern about marginalized groups. I remember saying that if you want to consider education for people with persons with disability, we would have to give them special consideration. People who come from marginalized regions, like Northeastern, or Turkana, or West Pokot, that they should be given some special consideration so they can catch up the rest of the country. Professor Magoha demonstrates to me, you know, it's like what I used to be when I was his age. He's a strong character person, and he will tell you his mind, the way it is. He will not lie to you so that you can, he can convince you to support him or to reject him. He says his mind clearly. And that type of person is the person we need in the Ministry of Education. Remember, before he became the chairman of NEC, exams in Kenya had become useless. Actually, certificates were being manufactured in the Kirinyaga Road. But with the reforms he has introduced in NEC, now exams in Kenya are credible. The certificate you get from any of our institutions is credible. And we believe, I believe very strongly, that it will make education in Kenya to be appreciated all over the world. We give him a chance, I'm sure it will make Kenya's education to be appreciated all over the world. He told us other thing, that if we are appointing him so that they can serve so that he can serve the Luos. He said, don't appoint me. Because I don't want to serve a community, one community. I want to serve Kenyans. The way I've been doing it, the previous so many years, for 31 years, he has been in the public service. You also, as a very good, my colleague was saying that about interpersonal relationship. That person told us very clearly that no patient that he has operated on has ever died, which means he had a very special relationship with the patients. You know, if you could have a special relationship with the patients, how about normal people? He will do it very well. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge the House support this report to approve this appointment, and I'm sure, take you to the bank, in the next 2-3 years, you will see a proper improvement and appropriate improvement in the education of Kenyans. With those few remarks, I beg to second.
Very well, honour members, before we propose a question, allow me to recognize, as you are aware, honour members, starting yesterday, there is taking place in Nairobi, the inaugural Africa Parliamentary Researchers Conference. And allow me to recognize some of the visitors who are in the speakers gallery. Mr. Wolfgang Hiller, who is the Director, European Parliamentary Research Service, Brussels. And two, Mr. Mark Quinner, from the National Conference of State Legislatures in the United States of America, and Mr. John Power, the Director, Priest, Northern Ireland Assembly, UK. They are welcome to observe proceedings in the National Assembly. Honour members, I wish to propose the question, which is that taking into consideration the findings of the Committee on Appointments in the report of the vetting of the nominee for approval as a Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Education, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, March 19, 2019, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 152, Clause 2 of the Constitution, and Sections 3 and 5 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, this House approves the appointment of Professor George Albert Omore Magoha as the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Education. What's the point of order, Honorable Pukose? There is a point of order. There is a point of order by the member for Endebess.
Honorable Speaker, considering the interest this motion has, and being historical today that the leader of the minority is the one who has moved this motion, meaning that we are in agreement to approve it and we want to contribute. Could we please limit the debate to 3 minutes so that most of us can contribute to it?
Honour members, I suppose that this is an appeal to the chair. Well, the Honourable Pukose has requested that given that there appears to be immense interest, I have 40 requests on my screen here about the number of members who, now they have become 41, who require to contribute. Now they have become 42. The numbers are increasing. The Honourable Pukose requests that debate on this motion by every member be limited to 3 minutes. No, I think I seem to get a sense that the proposal is generally acceptable. 3 minutes. And because the standing orders do not provide for a procedure, because debate has not been adjourned, So you cannot use standing order number 97. We can only go to standing order number 1, which is the only one that the member for Kichutu Church and North remembers. Therefore, in exercise of powers conferred on the Speaker and the standing order number 1, I accede to the request by the Honorable Pukose that debates by every member be limited to 3 minutes. Now I have 44 requests. So it is therefore ordered accordingly for the clerks to begin noting that. I see that there is the member for Kiminini is on top of the list.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support. Mr. Speaker, Professor Magoha, I knew him when I was a postgraduate student at the University of Nairobi, and I also worked with him when I was a lecturer at the university. Mr. Speaker, Professor Magoha, from where he has worked, starting from the University of Nairobi, where we had series of strikes. During his tenure, Mr. Speaker, everything was stabilized. Mr. Speaker, when he came to Kenya National Examination Council, where credibility of exams was a problem, he managed to stabilize that, Mr. Speaker. When you do a trend analysis, you can see that Professor Magoha, everywhere has been going, has been successful. And when you extrapolate that trend, Mr. Speaker, you realize that even if he becomes a CS of education, I have no doubt Mr. Speaker is going to succeed. I was privileged to be in the vetting, Mr. Speaker, as a friend of the committee. And one of the things critically that he said, Mr. Speaker, is that failure has never appeared in his vocabulary, Mr. Speaker. That is the kind of a person that you want to see. We don't want CSS who have no experience, Mr. Speaker. Professor Magoha has risen through the ranks. When you look at his history, when he joined the University of Nairobi, he was a lecturer, Mr. Speaker. He rose, he became a principal, and he became a vice chancellor. So I'm requesting honorable members today, the problems we have in the education sector, we have no doubt that Honorable Professor Magoha is going to sort out. Mr. Speaker, I know we have critical issues when it comes to matters of education. We have the difficult people who are very good in their work they do, and this was said by Honorable Badi. We know Nat is there with the able hands of Honorable Sosioni. We know the Kupet is there under the able hands of Omilema Mboka. I have no doubt that his kind of leadership, Mr. Speaker, because he said he worked as a team, he's going to work together collaboratively with the NAT and with the Kupet, particularly on the issues of competence-based curriculum, Mr. Speaker. Because we asked that question, and he said, and the competence-based curriculum, Mr. Speaker, is the way to go. But Honorable Sosioni, who is my very good friend, says that the trainers have not yet been trained. So it is indeed important that it be trained. So you can see they're already agreeing. He's a family man, Mr. Speaker. He's a staunch practicing Catholic like myself, Mr. Speaker. I have no doubt that Professor Magoha is the one we require in the Ministry of Education, Mr. Speaker. And I'm humbly requesting the doubting Thomases that might be there, Mr. Speaker, to change and support Professor Magoha. He's the one who is going to bring the true change that we require in the Ministry of Education, Mr. Speaker. And with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support. Thank you.
Nominee 001.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this particular opportunity. Honorable Speaker, and as I had declared my conflict of interest, Professor Magoha was my dean in medical school. Honorable Speaker, when I became the SONU president, there was commercialization of education in the University of Nairobi, where introduction of parallel degree program meant that a child with an A without money will not pursue any degree in the University of Nairobi, but if you have a D with money, then you just bridge and pursue the degree of your own choice. Honorable Speaker, it was only Professor Magoha who understood my voice of reason, despite the fact that I was suspended, because even if he voiced out that he understood my voice of reason, there was orders from above that we be suspended from the University of Nairobi. And I thank God that 17 years later, Professor Magoha was made the chairman of NEC, and he streamlined education, and that is why a parallel degree program died a natural death 17 years later. Honorable Speaker, and Professor Magoha when he appeared before us, he was a voice of reason. Very firm, religious, authoritative, a go-getter, very disciplined, intelligent, and a progressive thinker, and above all, is a top-notch professor of surgery, known within our country and outside our country. Honorable Speaker, Dr. Kose, who is a known surgeon, also went through his hands. Even Dr. Esiele also went through his hand. These are known surgeons, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, he supervised Honorable Pokose for his postgraduate degree. So this is a person who is known and who have risen through the ranks. He became the dean, then principal, then DVC, then vice chancellor, and then NEC, and now I'm sure this house will approve him to become the cabinet secretary of education, in which I know he will perform extremely very well. Honorable Speaker, at that particular time when he was the vice chancellor, there was the likes of Honorable Bandi, who introduced the 10th strategic management unit in costing and accommodation fee in our university. And I think even up to now, they have never gotten somebody with that top-notch brain in the university. And that particular strategy have withstood the test of time. It is still there. And at that time when we were there, he introduced costing, and we were able to pay 11 shillings for a plate of ugali, sukuma wiki.
So is this in support of Honorable Mbandi, or is this? Well, you know, the timing is actually not just here. Don't worry about that. The timing is. I'll give you 10 seconds.
Therefore, I urge this House to approve Professor Magoha, George Magoha, son of Magoha, because I'm 100% sure he will streamline the education sector. Honorable Junet, you don't have to laugh throughout. You know, sometimes human beings are to error.
Member for Seme. Member for Seme. Member for Seme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand as a professional to support the nomination of a pure professional. Mr. Speaker, I know Professor Magoha well. We taught together at Nairobi University, and actually we practiced together in the same office when he was still practicing and I was still practicing. Professor Magoha, Mr. Speaker, is a man of high integrity and has a very healthy relationship with politics. During the establishments of OWASH, Jimmy Angwenyi, myself, Kilemi Mwiri, he told us it is a good thing, but don't make it political. One day it will work. Today it is working. Professor Magoha is a professional of high integrity and will go to any length to protect a professional point. He was a private doctor to a very senior government officer who was going through very hard times with the government, and he insisted he will look after him as a professional regardless of what the government thinks. Mr. Speaker, as a surgeon, he is competent. He is committed to duty. As dean and a principal, he even raised money to actually put up an executive office block and a modern lecture theater. As a vice chancellor, he raised money to construct the university tower that we all know about. What he did in NEC, I do not have to say. We all know. I know his no-nonsense stance may sometimes be mistaken by some people as arrogance, but I can tell you, Professor Magoha is humble enough to quickly accept if there is a mistake that he has made. We need him at this time when we have so many commendable projects in the Ministry of Education that need harmonization and competent management. he will fit the bill. Mr. Speaker, I support the nomination of Professor Magoha.
Member from where?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the appointment of Professor George Albert Omose Magoha. I've gone through his CV, Mr. Speaker, and I have no doubt he qualifies. Mr. Speaker, he's a man who has held positions of integrity, positions of respect, Mr. Speaker, rising all the way to be the president of Association of Medical Practitioners of Africa, and many other positions in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I therefore support his nomination, and I would want to dwell on his next duties, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry of Education, one of the things that we would look forward to seeing, Mr. Speaker, is a fair distribution of resources. Mr. Speaker, we would want to see some kind of a checklist of schools that we have in this country. We would want to see what are the basics of a secondary school in this country. We would want to see him putting in resources to ensure that there is some balancing, especially on the facilities, Mr. Speaker. I have in mind some of the schools that we have in some of our constituencies who are not sure when they will see a laboratory simply because the kit that we have in CDF cannot afford to provide all the infrastructure that is required, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Professor Magoha, being an academic administrator himself, I am hoping that you'll be able to focus, especially on infrastructure. And because I know his reasoning, I want him to start with my own area, a settlement area referred to as South Gariama, Mr. Speaker, where 7 primary schools are in their need of infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. They have only 1 secondary school, and there are no allocations for the last 2 years. I've not seen any infrastructure money allocated to this particular area, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, as I support his nomination, wherever he is, because I know his reasoning, let him start with South Gariama, bring in resources so that our children can enjoy education like other areas, and more so have facilities that can enable them to pursue their education as others by providing equal opportunities to all our students out there. Mr. Speaker, I support the nomination.
Honourable members, in the spirit of trying to balance, I'm trying to look on this screen. I don't see this. Yeah, this is the thing I'm looking for. Among the first 18 names on the screen, I can't see a single one. No, I'm supposed to see you on the screen. I mean, it just means that they just come and first of all relax and now. Maybe it is because it's after lunch, but let me get the member for Kibwezi West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For this, I want to stand primarily, I know we're going to pass Professor Magoha, but to speak to the opportunities which are ahead of us as a country in the education sector. And I think it's imperative that we leave Professor Magoha must lead an able, renaissance within the African region. We had universities like JKUAT, Moi, offering programs all the way to Nigeria. And a progression as a country, it's big being utilized by the other countries. Countries like Seychelles have benefited greatly from our teachers. Kenya went to revamp the entire education sector in the Seychelles, in Malaysia, and this needs to be seen in this current age. And I look forward to Professor Magoha leading this. And we have to see a renaissance, even within our public sector, by having students from our neighboring countries coming to study inside Kenya. That way, we have to start giving ourselves a global view, and knowing that we are benchmarking ourselves with the best in the world. And starting to reverse issues where we are having a lot of people moving to private schools, but by so encouraging students from our neighboring countries, like Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, coming to study within our education system. And this will propel, one, our diaspora earnings, because we need a lot of remittances in Kenya. And the amount of money that we have put into the education sector over the years in terms of investments is actually colossal amounts. And we must start seeing this big return by having our students in all of our counties sharing facilities with our neighbors. This will ensure that we entrench the spirit of East Africa community, our African Renaissance, by having this, exchange programs that grow with us. We want to see the arena of teachers, our lecturers growing. The investments into research have to be seen. We want to see Kenya heralding to start launching things like satellites. We had lecturers in the University of Nairobi coming up with nano-satellite technology, and they need to be encouraged. And this needs to grow, because this is where we will attract investments that will keep growing this great nation. Finally, Mr. Speaker, as we look into ourselves, even within legislation, we want to see parallel programs being encouraged by the CS that look at the inferential between the learnings within this house and extending the same within society. This will give first-hand experience, and I believe this is why we've tapped into him as a 67-year-old, to draw into the examples that are being grown internally and ensure that it comes to a better.
Member for Endebess.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to support this very important motion to approve Professor George Makoa as the Cabinet Secretary for Education. Mr. Speaker, Professor Makoa taught me both at undergraduate at the University of Nairobi and the postgraduate. He was my supervisor for the postgraduate thesis. And he was able to find time during that time as the Vice Chancellor to guide me until I was able to pass. Mr. Speaker, the other day I was sharing with Honorable Mbui, who happened to be in the vetting committee, on the issue about Professor Makoa saying that you should have an appointment to go and see him. I think in the meaning of it is that he is very meticulous. He plans his time. And when he plans his time, he can give you an appointment at even 6:30 in the morning. And therefore, as an honorable member, when you book an appointment and he gives you 6:30 in the morning or 7 o'clock, it's just he needs time to be able to work on his schedule. It does not mean that he does not want you to go and have an appointment with him. Mr. Speaker, as a surgeon, he's done well. He's a professor of urology. He used to tell us in medical school, water must flow. When he says water must flow, it means he must make sure that your tract to be able to pass urine from the body is able to go well. So he ensures that that is done. He's done very well. Even as a chair of the Medical Practitioners and Dentists Board, which I'm a member, he's been able to guide the board very well and in an exemplary position. Mr. Speaker, I think we cannot say more about what he's done in the National Examination Council. And I'm hoping that my colleagues, Honorable Sosion and Honorable Omboko Milemba, will be able to have a better person to give them audience with their teachers and be able to solve the long cases of teachers going on strike and that kind of thing, which has been the norm within our country. But I think that is now going to come to an end. And with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Well, on account of something that was said by the mover in moving about the nominee when he was Vice Chancellor, having stabilized Nairobi University, I want to give this chance to somebody who left the university not too long ago and who appeared at the vetting committee without applying to be admitted, but was very, very happy to cheer. Now the member is going now to speak. The Honorable Babu Owino.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very happy with you today. And may God add you more years on earth. Mr. Speaker, Professor Magoha, as I can say, is a professor who means what he says and says what he means. Professor, as the longest serving student leader on earth, I served for 3 terms under Professor Magoha's during his regime. And I can say that this is a professor who gives students an opportunity. He gives a second chance for somebody to make his life. When I joined the University of Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, I was suspended. Were it not for Professor to bring me back to the university, I would not be a member of parliament today. And I'm so happy and proud that under his regime, during his regime, Mr. Speaker, I scored first-class honors. It is not easy to even score a C now when you are doing exams. Mr. Speaker, therefore, when people say that Professor Magoha is arrogant, he is not. He is just firm, but he's not arrogant. Mr. Speaker, for universities' fees not to be increased, Professor Magoha must be the Cabinet Secretary, Education. Mr. Speaker, for our children to get quality education, Professor Magoha must be the Cabinet Secretary, Education. For our suspended and expelled children and brothers and sisters to be brought back to campus, Professor Magoha must be the Cabinet Secretary, Education. For comrades not to be shot anyhowly and killed, Mr. Speaker, Professor Magoha must be the Cabinet Secretary for Education. Mr. Speaker, for our children to be fully God-fearing, Professor Magoha must be the Cabinet Secretary, Education. Mr. Speaker, whether the sky comes on the ground or the ground goes to the sky, Professor Magoha must be the Cabinet Secretary for Education. And this is the best decision, Mr. Speaker, our President made this year. Mr. Speaker, may God bless Uhuru Kenyatta. He's given us an angel direct from heaven. Thank you, and God bless you. I support, Mr. Speaker.
So members of the committee can understand why perhaps it was going to be unwise to allow the Honorable Babu Awino to ask questions, because he would have breached the rules that in the committee you don't sing praises. Here you can. Here you are perfect in order. But at the vetting committee it would have been... Member for Nyaribari Masaba.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Here we are discussing about one Kenyan who has done exemplary work, outstanding and an impeccable record. Ever since the time he joined the public service, public sector as a lecturer, and was able to rise through the ranks up to an associate professor and principal of the health sciences, he has been able to demonstrate that indeed, his record is not comparable to any other. Even what he did during the 10 years as Vice Chancellor of Nairobi University, Mr. Speaker, sir, during that time, there were quite a number of problems, a number of challenges, and Professor Magoha was able to tackle all those challenges. And by the time he was leaving the university as Vice Chancellor in 2015, I think he had done quite a commendable work.
There's a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, sorry, I didn't want to really interrupt my colleague, but he referred to Professor Magoha as an associate professor. He's a full professor. So associate means you're not fully a professor. So I just wanted him to correct that.
Thank you, point taken. And this time, Honorable Speaker, we are aware that Kenya education system is undergoing quite a lot of challenges. We are undergoing reforms. We have the competence-based curriculum, which actually the best person that will be able to midwife that particular curriculum is none other than Professor Magoha. We have the 100% transition from primary school to secondary, and the kind of challenges we have, the best person who will be able to tackle those challenges and ensure that our children are able to transition from primary to secondary is none other than Professor Magoha. Indeed, he has what it takes, and we commend His Excellency the President because this is the best Kenyan that he has been able to give an opportunity to serve in that key ministry of education, because education is the prerequisite of development of all the other sectors of the economy. We hope that once he takes over, all those other challenges like university education, Mr. Speaker, we are worried about the quality and the standards in our university education. The challenges in university, Professor is well equipped and very familiar.
Member for Siaya.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk about my professor. Professor comes from Siaya. Unfortunately, again, he comes from my ward, that is Yala Township. I have known him for a long time, and currently he's the chair of the board of Yala, St. Mary's Yala. The school has improved tremendously ever since he became the chair. And every time we have Parents' Day in that school, literally every parent turns up because they want to see what he tells them, because they cherish what he tells them, and he believes in education. And so Professor, even at the village level, is highly respected, that none of his advice will pass by. People consult him. People seek his advice because he's a forthright person, he's a disciplinarian, he is a go-getter, he speaks from the bottom of his heart, and he will never, never tell anybody a lie. And secondly, since he became the chair of NEC, we have seen transformation in the education system. There's no leakage of exams, there's no cheating, and even students today are very scared of cheating because of the discipline has put in education. I want to say that we have got the right person for the job, and that there's going to be a lot of improvement now that he has become the CS of education. I admire him a lot for the very fact that even when he was the chair of NEC, at the time the CS of security, that is Mr. Matiang'i, Dr. Matiang'i, was also the CS of education. The two worked very, very well, very mutually, and they really delivered what we needed. Again, when Madam Mohammed, what's her name again? Amina Mohammed took over, he really was behind every success that Amina made. So I think he's one person that is worth working with, somebody who must be in that education and will transform the education the way we want it. I think that goes for anybody else who will be in that position. I think this is the person whose career, whose experience, whose education, his ability to perform should be admired and encouraged. And this is the way to go, and the president should continue to choose or to nominate such individuals. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I support the appointment of Professor Magoha, my village mate. Thank you very much.
The village mate. Member for South Imenti. Member not present, but he gave an indication on that with his card. Now I can see after that there's a member for Kikuyu.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, at the risk of repeating myself, repeating what has been said by many other members, I want to be very brief, Honorable Speaker, that indeed, when I was vetting, one of the things that have been said about Professor Magoha, son of Magoha, being forthright and being very faithful to the truth is indeed something I witnessed during his vetting when I asked him a question about the circumstances under which Dr. Matiang'i left the University of Nairobi, and he was very forthright, Honorable Speaker, and that is something, Honorable Speaker, that caught me, that this is somebody who is forthright, somebody who sticks to the truth and stands for the truth. Two, Honorable Speaker, the thing I had observed about Professor Magoha long before even he was nominated as a cabinet secretary when he was working at the University of Nairobi, is his dedication to results. And he was able to move the University of Nairobi, even as he testified during the vetting process, from an institution that was largely dependent on government funding, Honorable Speaker. And at this time when we have challenges with our public universities, Honorable Speaker, I think it is only befitting that a person of the caliber of Professor Magoha is now the head of the Ministry of Education. And I do pray that he will be able now in his new position to guide our public universities to be able to work in the way he worked as Vice Chancellor of the University of Nairobi, to make most of our public universities self-reliant, because many of them are still dependent on government. Many of them are struggling financially, and I believe with the kind of skills he used at the University of Nairobi, he can be able to impact the same knowledge and same skills to many of our Vice Chancellors to be able to deliver the way he did at the University of Nairobi. Honorable Speaker, Professor Magoha also comes out as somebody, as Dr. Nyikal, who has worked with him, said, somebody who looks forceful and rather aggressive. But I think it is in his character, and it is good for a ministry where he has to deal with some of our very good trade unionists, like Omboko Miremba here and Sosion of NAT. And I want to encourage him not to be intimidated at all by Honorable Sosion and the likes, and to do what will be in the best interest of the children of Kenya, Honorable Speaker, and not to be intimidated by our trade unionists, and to know that even with the trade unions after his neck, we are there for him to defend him for the sake of our children. Honorable Speaker, Professor Magoha also came out as somebody who is very articulate in what he wants to achieve, and it was clear to me during vetting that he's clear on what he's coming to do in the ministry. And I want to encourage, and the support he has gotten from members, Honorable Speaker, is testimony that indeed he's somebody who has been appointed on merit. And I pray to God that we will see less boisterous cabinet secretaries and more people like Professor Magoha.
Member for Suna East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support this motion, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I won't belabor the point that Professor Magoha is qualified for this job that he has been given, and he has the experience, the knowledge, and all kind of requisite that is needed to perform that job. But Mr. Speaker, I cannot dwell on the credentials of Professor Magoha. If this House, in their own wisdom, could pass the nomination of Echesa as a cabinet secretary, Mr. Speaker, we should spend very little time to discuss Professor Magoha here, Mr. Speaker. If Echesa went through here, Mr. Speaker, we had only a birth certificate, Mr. Speaker. I think the rest is just... Mr. Speaker, this is a point that I needed to make, that this is a foregone conclusion. But Mr. Speaker, there are a few issues I picked when the interview process was going on, Mr. Speaker, and I read from the report of the committee that you chaired. Mr. Speaker, I want to understand I hope Professor Magoha will have very good interpersonal relationship, especially with the uneducated, Mr. Speaker. It looks like somebody, these people who have very high qualifications of education, Mr. Speaker, have problems on how to relate with uneducated people. They sometimes look down upon them, and they don't take them very serious, Mr. Speaker, when they spend every coin they have to educate their own children. My second point I picked from the report, Mr. Speaker, is that Professor Magoha looks like he's opposed to these universities coming up in many counties and massification of universities. I think he's still living in the old days that he only wants University of Nairobi to be the only one in Kenya still. He's not interested in other universities. He only knows the University of Nairobi and nothing else, Mr. Speaker. The university, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other issue I wanted to raise, Mr. Speaker, is a constitutional issue, Mr. Speaker. Looks like, Mr. Speaker, the president is in love with Siaya County. 3 ministers, Mr. Speaker, from one county. Honorable Tuju, Honorable Omamo, now Professor Magoha, Mr. Speaker. We have other counties in Nyanza. Why can't he appoint Millie Odhiambo to be the Minister of Education, Mr. Speaker? She can serve very well, Mr. Speaker. She's from Homa Bay, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as much as we agree with he is the right person, Mr. Speaker, let us not make per kilometer square to have a minister in Siaya, Mr. Speaker. Other counties also require representation. And with that few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Member for Bomet Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to also support this motion. I believe it's in the public domain that Professor Magoha is highly experienced, right from the time he was the Vice Chancellor of University of Nairobi, which he has performed. He's a performer and is academically quite qualified, very superior. Those ones, I do agree with him. I believe the only issue which is, needs to be addressed by the appointing authority is the issue of regional balance. To have county with 3 CSs, I believe is quite awkward, and we may need to redistribute those CSs so that we also have South Nyanza, we also have Kakamega also being represented. I believe that can be very, very important to relook into. I believe now that we have been informed that he believes the only university, what being there is University of Nairobi, he will not go after our small universities such as the University of Bomet University, that he will try to build those universities to the level where University of Nairobi is. And on the issues of infrastructure, the school, funding the school, I believe he will try to be very fair so that all the schools can be considered, not just the national schools, where the kids of the rich are, while the small day schools, where the kids of the poor are given very little funding. I believe this one will need to be reviewed. On the issue of consolidation, I'm happy to hear that is very good in terms of consolidation. It will need to consult with all those stakeholders in the education, especially the trade union movement in the education sector, right from KUPPET, right from NAT, WASU, and all those, so that it can come with the right policies in the education sector. If it will become a bully, a pushover, that is not consulting, is a professor with a know-it-all attitude, we will not get the best education system in this country. So I believe you will need to consult. Now that is a specialist in the medical sector. How I wish he was to be appointed to that sector, because that sector also requires critically somebody of good qualification like Professor Magoha. But since we are not appointing authority, we leave it to the appointing authority. And I also respect what he did in Kenya National Examination Council.
Member for Emuhaya.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to support the appointment of Professor Magoha to become the CS for education. And all the accolades that are good about him have been stated. But I want to actually address Professor Magoha and remind him that as he comes to the Ministry of Education, his job is well cut. There's the curriculum, new curriculum that has the CBC curriculum that is wanting, and we are not sure what will be happening. The textbook policy is a challenge in the ministry now, and schools are being flooded with books, even those that they don't need. NEMIS is wanting, while at the same time, birth certificates which are given by the government and are actually, the deadlines are also given by the government, are now making some students not register as candidates in our schools. The 100% transition, which has been adopted by the government today, has left many of our schools without infrastructure. While at the same time, Honorable Speaker, the Teacher Service Commission does not have enough teachers in our schools. While at the same time, Magoha should be aware that the idea of cost sharing is back in our schools, because most of the teachers are now being paid by the BOMs, and these are just parents. Delocalization is also a serious threat in the education sector. But more importantly, Honorable Speaker, is the fact that Professor Magoha, as he comes in as a strong professor, well-defined here and moved, he is coming as a man who has a lot of precision that is to do with surgery, but is coming to an area where that precision must be seriously harmonized with the other factors, because the education sector demands for public participation. It also demands for having the feelings of the people, the interests of the people, and also dealing with the stakeholders who are many, not only limited to the unions as have been alluded to in this house, but there are also many other stakeholders in this ministry. We have KEPSHA, we have KESHA, we have the parents associations in this area, and we have the students. And even in this particular sector, Mr. Speaker, we have students' councils, which are also important, must be listened to. And the stature he gives is that of great arrogance. I've seen many speakers here want to harmonize that stature, but maybe you could have used the word assertiveness. But I want to believe that stature of arrogance is assertiveness and is not arrogance. So when he comes, he should come knowing that he will have to put every stakeholder in place in order to make good decisions in the education sector. Otherwise, I wish him well and I want to support. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Member for Alego Usonga. But, Honorable members, part of the reason why I have to keep balance, the nominee is not just a villager. So, please, we want to avoid, kind of, I can see the very many eyes that they're looking at me seriously. Some are saying, and some of them appeared the other day saying that the DNA shows, he's my villager. They try to, we are talking about a highly qualified Kenyan, not about the DNA. Honorable Atandi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, everybody appears to be supporting the appointment and talking positively about Professor Magoha's leadership credentials. But, Mr. Speaker, while I support and encourage the House to adopt this motion, I would like to caution Mr. Speaker that I have listened and I watched the process of nomination, the grilling process in the chambers, in the House. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to make the following observations. That, Mr. Speaker, Professor Magoha appears to me like a dictator. And, Mr. Speaker, education sector is very complex. There are so many issues, there are so many institutions, there are so many civil society and the likes of trade unions. Mr. Speaker, if Professor Magoha will not employ a consultative approach to the management of this sector, I fear, Mr. Speaker, that we might have a crisis. So I want to urge him to ensure that he adopts a more consultative approach and engage the stakeholders. Because, Mr. Speaker, education is very important. And we do not want to see a situation where in future there's a crisis that people cannot talk. Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. I would like also to observe that there are so many good things that Professor Magoha did. In the area of leadership, Mr. Speaker, during his stint at the University of Nairobi, we know, Mr. Speaker, that he brought order. And he is one of those leaders we consider as bold. One time he told us that the reason why he's bold is because he touches balls of prominent people in Kenya because of his job as a urologist. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that that character of being a bold leader is going to be very important in this sector as well, so that he's not intimidated and bossed around by trade union leaders. Today we have trade unionists who are also members of parliament. So I know that there's a possibility that previous ministers, if you talk to them, they will tell you that the trade unionists have tried to boss them around. So I know that this will not happen because of his bold nature and the way he acts. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, which I would like to repeat, is that the introduction of Module 2 in universities can squarely be accredited to Professor Magoha. And because of that, Mr. Speaker, universities today, a lot of them are independent financially, and they're able to run their affairs very well. We want to see a more financially independent education sector, both at the local level, high school level, and university level. This, I think, Mr. Speaker, is going to be good for Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Mandela North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And I think most members have heaped praises on Professor Magoha. Certainly his CV notwithstanding, but I stand to oppose his appointment. Seriously, yes. And you know, you might have very good papers and CVs, but that doesn't translate to be that you'll be a good manager or run the institutions that you are appointed to. A case in point is, if I look at last year's KCSE exams, the way it was conducted, I mean, there was securitization of the entire exercise, courtesy of Professor Magoha. It was like we were watching Hollywood. Every minister, every senior civil servant went out there with arms, guarding students as if there was war. Were we fighting with Al-Shabaab or we were doing exams? And at the end of the exams, the good professor announced to Kenyans that there is no cheating and everything went well. When results were released, over 3,000 students' results were withheld. And then he claimed there was cheating. Why did he contradict himself? So in fact, the first time that was a show-off, that things are in order, and in between something happened. 3,000 students did not have their exams, and yet the entire internal security network was deployed to ensure there is no cheating. He confirmed there was no cheating, and yet results were cancelled. These are things the vetting committee should have asked him. We never asked that questions, but now at least you have an opportunity to tell Kenyans that you're not fit to hold that kind of office. Two, there's an issue of arrogancy. Professor Magoha has refused to accept audience with leaders from northern Kenya when they approached him for issues of exam cancellation. He said it doesn't bother them. They camped at the neck, there was no audience. Now he's the Minister for Education. All of you, I am certain you will not be able to access his office because he's arrogant. He sees you as somebody very low in terms of a CV. As the minority whip just said, you will not have access. We have people who don't have good CVs. They have started very low. Look at Sultan Joho. He's doing very well. He may not have papers. So papers alone doesn't mean you are a good manager. I oppose the appointment of Professor Magoha. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, honour members, because the member has finished, let me, obviously from this, member for Suba, is it south or north? Suba North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I wish to support, and even as I'm supporting, Mr. Speaker, I want to inform the member who has just spoken before me that Honorable Joho actually has a CV, a serious one, and is even continuing with his education. But that is aside, Mr. Speaker. I also want to correct what Honorable Machogu said about Professor Magoha being an associate professor. He's not an associate professor. I am the associate professor because I associate with professors. And Mr. Speaker, I also want to correct the notion by Honorable Junet when he called, I don't know what he was saying about Nairobi University. And I want to tell him that we went to the Nairobi University. All the other universities are Moi University, Egerton University, what university? But we went to the Nairobi University, Mr. Even the Speaker went to the Nairobi University. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I just wanted to encourage members to know that when we say that, it is an issue of confidence. It is not arrogance, Mr. Speaker. I do not wish to inform, I don't wish to be informed, thank you. Mr. Speaker, Professor Magoha is a very confident person. And let us not confuse confidence with arrogance. In fact, we should be seeing more of that based on academic performance and not thievery that has become the hallmark of this country. That people are proud because they can steal and they can get away with it. Let us see our young people getting away because of academic performance. Mr. Speaker, I want to say I don't want to dwell on his CV. In law, this is what we call res ipsa loquitur. The facts speak for themselves. So I do not want to add to his CV. I just want to caution, like my brother said, that for those of us who have been elected, you know that when you come in with the highest number, the greatest challenge you face is with the crisis of expectation. And for Professor Magoha, his greatest challenge is a crisis of expectation. People will be expecting very highly of him, especially because of the accolades that he has received. I have worked very closely with his brother who was a DC in my constituency. I have not worked very closely with Professor myself, and I think it is a family trait. He was a very effective DC, and most people didn't like him because then his people relation was a bit questionable, but he was effective in his work. So he needs to pick up what people are telling him in terms of feedback, that he needs to learn. When members of parliament, especially the honorable member for Madeira, that is saying that he cannot meet members of parliament, there are cabinet secretaries who have been thrown out because they don't listen to people's representatives. So I want to encourage him to listen to people's representatives. When a member of parliament comes to your office and want to address an issue in relation to their constituency, listen to them. And Mr. Speaker, I also want to indicate
Member for Kiharu. Oh. Then that chance now goes to none other than the Honorable Wilson Sosion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the report of the Appointment Committee. Of course, that goes without doubt, and I want to reassure Honorable Ichungwa that we are prepared to engage very productively with the new Cabinet Secretary in the sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is one of the most meritorious appointments that has been undertaken in the recent past. Considering that this is a critical sector, a sector with over 300,000 teachers and 15 million children, and affecting a sector that affects every household. Mr. Speaker, a number of issues as the Cabinet Secretary comes in. Of course, a lot of praises have been showered on him, but a lot of expectations in the sector. Number one, education is a social service. And being a social service that is so essential, it requires the absolute unity by the stakeholders in the sector. And therefore, we would expect Professor Magoha to provide good leadership and unite the sector so that it can deliver on the expectations of Kenya of delivering one of the best equitable quality education for all. Mr. Speaker, to deliver in this sector, and from experience of ministers who have succeeded, there must be intensive and continuous consultation. And this, we believe, Professor Magoha possesses this. Mr. Speaker, the number of challenges also in the sector that needs immediate address by the Cabinet Secretary. This is a sector that has received huge funding, and also it has attracted business interest and corruption. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, this is one aspect that the new minister shall have to address, among many other issues, particularly the new curriculum, a quality curriculum that is inspiring to the learners and that is good for the citizenship, must be midwife in a professional manner. There are a lot of questions about it. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support this appointment, and we are prepared to engage the Cabinet Secretary productively, without fear. Thank you.
Member for Nyeri Town.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support the nomination of Professor George Magoha. Education is about educating, preparing, qualifying, integrating people into society. and it's a learning process. For the first time, we have a scholar in charge of the ministry, and not just a scholar, we have a scholar who is proven, who has proven himself. He's a scientist. He has been an administrator of a learning institution, the University of Nairobi, where several of us passed through. And he has been a chairman of the process through which we check the integrity of our education process, which is the Kenya National Examinations Council. Mr. Speaker, where we are going, and I would like to borrow comments that were made by Honorable Musimba, what we expect of Professor Magoha is a different way of running our education sector. The world has become a village. And part of the world becoming a village requires our education system to jump very many spaces. We cannot go through the natural process of improving our education system, otherwise we're going to be left behind by the rest of the world. One of the expectations that I will have of Professor Magoha in his new role as CS of Education is that he's going to take our education system and put it at par with the best of the world. Our children and our children's children behind them have to be able to compete, have to be competitive with other students in the rest of the world in terms of the economics, in terms of the social skills that they have. And Mr. Speaker, I know there was a bit of a complaint from some of our colleagues on his social skills. Mr. Speaker, different people, we are all cut from different clothes. I think one of the things that is proven about Professor Magoha is that he has proven himself everywhere he has gone. We are all, I think, in unity that he deserves, he qualifies, he's the best person for this job. I think what we now need to be looking at is how do we then equip this ministry. We have had comments about the curriculum that the children are going to be going through from none other than Kenya National Union of Teachers. And one of the things we need to be now thinking about is how do we as a house ensure that the Ministry of Education is well equipped so that his capacity, matched with the capacity of the ministry, actually takes this ministry and delivers the expectations that we have of this ministry to each and every person who is learning, children or adults. And so that we can raise the integrity of our education system and become a learning institution and be able to stand up.
Member for Arienda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support this special motion. It is my view that in the candidate of Professor Magoha, opportunity meets competence in the presence of education. Mr. Speaker, it is not an often occurrence in this House that we find candidates of such competence and ability. I want to confirm, Mr. Speaker, two examples. One, as the ombudsman of this country, I worked with Professor Magoha as the Vice Chancellor of the University of Nairobi. And he was able to ensure that the university had a performance contracting index of 100%. That is competence. I want to confirm, Mr. Speaker, that as an advocate of the High Court, I took the first case seeking delisting of the first medical practitioner in this country. And that matter went before Professor Magoha as the chairman of the Medical Practitioners and Dentists Board. He had the courage to deregister one of his colleagues. That is courage and integrity. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I think this is the right candidate. Some members spoke of age. Fortunately, Mr. Speaker, this is one office where the age limit for other public officers does not apply in similar manner as it does not apply to members of this House. Some members spoke in terms of the county. I want to confirm, Mr. Speaker, that the only requirement that Article 130 has in terms of composition of the national executive is ethnic and regional diversity, not county diversity. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, if we were to consider the region and the ethnic extraction of the candidate, Mr. Speaker, you would actually find that there's a lot of space to have a lot more candidates. This speaker is well qualified and comes from a constituency that has a history of learning, second only to Rarieda. And Mr. Speaker, I am quite happy that we approve.
The only caution, Mr. Speaker, is that we must remind the nominee that ultimately the oath of office they swear is to the Constitution and to the people. And Article 130 and 153C, 153.3, compels cabinet secretaries to be answerable to this House. I invite us to keep Professor Magoha and all other cabinet secretaries on their toe on behalf of the people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Majority Whip, what's your point of order?
Honorable Speaker, as a whip, I am able to tell the direction of any debate, Honorable Speaker, from those who have debated and those who are likely to debate later. Honorable Speaker, the way I have listened to those who have already spoken, Honorable Speaker, we can easily deduce the direction this debate is going. And given that the motion, this order number 10 is equally very, very important for this House, and it has timelines, and that it's likely to go for mediation, Honorable Speaker, I want to request members listening to me and those who would have wished to actually to support this order number 9 to think about it and allow the mover to reply under order number 95. If you are going to support.
Yes, honourable members, you know, the Majority Whip has a point. It's a point. He has a very good point. I don't know, you know, sometimes the part of the reason why members would want to argue this is because I suspect many members don't look through the entire order paper. Because surely when I hear some of you saying order number 10 may not be important, then it means that you may not have, you know, there's something called vertical division of national revenue. It is done through the Division of Revenue Act. So you must therefore appreciate the importance of this particular motion. But nevertheless, honour members, you see, if everybody is just supporting, is it that you just want to appear on, now they are not showing. Now they are showing the Senate. So, so they are not showing this house now, they are showing the other house. So even if you wanted a bonga point, it's not, the nominee is not actually now watching. So I believe you have done reasonable justice to this motion. No, it cannot be. It is not possible that everybody will speak. So I think, you know, there must be, we must put a closure to some of these things. You know, I will particularly not allow, even if we were to continue. Because the Honorable Elisha Odhiambo, you made a very good move. You applied to appear before the committee as a friend, just like the Honorable Chris Wamalwa, who asked a very important question. But you, when you were given a chance, you started telling us about DNA of your professor and yourself and game. Now, I mean, so even if you stand here now, what are you going to tell us about DNA? No, that is your constituent. No, but in any event, your name is not even here on the screen yet. No, honourable members, there must be a closure. There's not everybody who will speak to every, I mean, So, honourable members, therefore, I put the question that the mover be called upon to reply. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say no? The ayes have it. Mover, the Honourable John Bandi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank all the members who have had opportunity to contribute to this motion to adopt the report. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm being asked to, but I thought if the mover is called upon to reply, I don't have that luxury. If it was the normal way, I would have donated. But the standing orders block me from doing that. Mr. Speaker, just for clarity, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all the members who have contributed to the debate. And apart from one honorable member, I think all the other members actually agreed to approve this. I just want to say two things quickly because I don't want us to lose the numbers. I want to also agree with Honorable Tiendi Amolo that what is talked about under Article 132 is a composition of the National Executive shall reflect the regional and ethnic diversity of the people of Kenya. We actually were debating in the committee that we should now define what is a region if we want to have this, the provisions of this constitution followed. Mr. Speaker, I think Professor Magoha, wherever he is, has listened to those MPs who have expressed fears about possibility of him being arrogant and being inaccessible, and the member from Mandera who complained seriously about being mistreated and about the issues of new curriculum. I think those are not idle statements. But finally, Mr. Speaker, on issue of militarizing the examinations, I think it could be partly true or partly false also, because again, where our examination had reached, really something drastic had to be done. And I think we cannot blame Magoha for taking such serious drastic actions to bring back sanity to our examination. Because really, some of us are where we are today because of fair examinations. If examinations were not fair, many of us probably would not even be here today. So, Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I want to thank my colleagues, and I beg to move.
He was replying. So, honourable members, I put the question, which is that taking into consideration the findings of the Committee on Appointments in its report on the vetting of the nominee for approval as the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Education, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, March 19, 2019, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 152, Clause 2 of the Constitution, and Sections 3 and 5 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, this House approves the appointment of Professor George Albert Omore Magoha as the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Education. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say no? No. The ayes have it. So, yes, next order.
Order number 10, the Division of Revenue Bill, National Assembly Bill number 11 of 2019, second reading.
Now, honour members, before the Chair of Budget and Appropriations Committee begins to move his motion, there has been a request which I have acceded to remove from the order paper for further consultations the business appearing as order number 12. That's the motion titled Report on a Meeting to promote and popularize the ratification of the protocol on the free movement of persons and its implementation roadmap, even though this motion was just seeking the House to note and is a report of a meeting. But there's still some people think that they need to do further consultation with the committee chair. So this business is taken out of the order paper, it's deferred. So after order number 11, we move to order number 13. The House is accordingly guided. Honorable Ishungwa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I beg to move that the House does adopt the Division of Revenue Bill, National Assembly Bill number 11 of 2019, that the bill be read for a second time. Honorable Speaker, as our majority whip, the Honorable Ashali, has indicated, this is one of the bills that in the budget cycle have a timeline of 30 days from the time it first appears in this House between the National Assembly and the Senate, And as members may be well aware, our Senate has already proposed an additional allocation, I think, of about 25 billion shillings to 335 billion going to the county governments. And what is in this bill is a figure of about 310 billion. And therefore, as Honorable Ashali rightly stated, it is bound to end up in mediation unless, of course, IBEC and the summit, which is usually chaired by His Excellency the President, does agree with the county Council of Governors in their summit on the final figures. But as it is now, Mr. Speaker, we work on the premise that we probably will end up with mediation this year. Unlike last year when these things were agreed at IBEC, and we were able to conclude both the division of revenue and our appropriations well ahead of time. Honorable Speaker, the Division of Revenue Bill, National Assembly Bill number 11 of 2019 was read for first time during the afternoon sitting of Tuesday, March 12, 2019. And pursuant to Standing Order 127-2, the bill stood committed to the Budget and Appropriations Committee. The bill, Honorable Speaker, seeks to provide for sharing of revenue raised nationally between the national government and the county governments for the financial year 2019-2020 in accordance with Article 202, 203, 205, and 218, sub-Article 2 of the Constitution. The committee, Honorable Speaker, has had deliberations on this matter as is contained in the report that we tabled before the House yesterday, and we did engage with a number of stakeholders, top among them during the budget policy statement. We did engage with the Council of Governors, CRA, the National Treasury, amongst others, Honorable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the enactment of the Division of Revenue Bill 2019 is critical in setting the stage for the preparation of the County Allocation of Revenue Bill 2019, which will inform the firming up and completion of preparation of the annual budget estimates for the 47 county governments. It is therefore in the spirit and letter of Article 224 of the Constitution, which requires that county governments will prepare and adopt their annual budgets and appropriations bills based on the approved Division of Revenue Bill, that we timely dispense with its approval and subsequent enactment, thus facilitating the county government budgeting process to go on undisrupted. Honorable Speaker, just to buttress that point is that the county governments cannot and may not be able to commence on preparation of their budgets for the next financial year if we have not passed this Division of Revenue Bill, because it's on the basis of this Division of Revenue Bill that shares revenues, the vertical sharing of revenue between the national and the county governments, that then informs our county governments on how much they will budget on, and therefore they're able to prepare their budgets and consequently their appropriations bills in line with what we'll have passed in the Division of Revenue Bill. Honorable Speaker, if members peruse through the report, the Division of Revenue Bill 2019 proposes to allocate a sum of 371,600 million to county governments as follows. That's 371.6 billion shillings. County equitable share, that is a vertical division, a figure of 310 billion as a county equitable share. 2 additional conditional allocations from the share of the national government of 3.911 billion, or 13,911 million. 3, an allocation from the fuel levy fund of Kenya shillings 8.984 billion. And conditional grants, conditional allocations from loans and grants of Kenya shillings 38.704 billion. Honorable Speaker, it's instructive to note that there have been increments, especially in the fuel levy fund of 8.9, that's almost 9 billion shillings, that should go to county governments, besides what has been allocated to the county governments in the equitable share. A further 9 billion shillings, which is specifically for roads in our neighborhoods, in various wards and our constituencies across all the 47 counties. And Honorable Speaker, it is instructive that many of our county leadership, both governors and MCAs, are not able to show the public what they're able to do with these fuel levy funds. Unlike members of parliament, Honorable Speaker, who use the fuel levy funds allocated to KERA and engage the public, and there is actually public participation in many constituencies on how this money is utilized. Members of the public are never able to have any form of social audits on this fuel levy funds. And it's important for Kenyans to note that 9 billion shillings now is going to specifically address roads that are under the charge of county governments, Honorable Speaker. Besides what is already in the budget, the 310 billion, out of which they will prepare budgets again, that they will allocate another amount to the maintenance of roads in the wards. And many members of parliament have challenges because members of the public generally walk to their members of parliament to ask them to work on roads, even roads that are per se under the mandate of the county governments. And it's important that members of the public do understand that beyond category C, A, B, C, those are the only roads that are under the mandate of the national government, whose oversight is done by members of parliament. Therefore, most of the other county roads, members of the public should understand that they should take to their members of county assemblies and governors to account, not just for these 9 billion, but also for the 310 billion, part of which will go into the maintenance of these roads. Honorable Speaker, the conditional allocations to county governments, Honorable Speaker, if I just mention a few, 4.3 billion shillings is going to level 5 hospitals. Again, Honorable Speaker, members may note that many of our level 5 hospitals are in dire need, and across many counties, we are not seeing a lot of good work. There are a few counties, Honorable Speaker, and I must mention the county of Mombasa, which I visited, is among the counties I visited during the public participation exercise last year, and the county of Makueni, where we saw very good work being done in the level 5 hospitals, and this money is being put into very good use. And we want to encourage all other county governments to follow suit, like the county of Makueni, county of Mombasa. At least in the healthcare sector, they have done really well. To supplement for construction of county headquarters, as we did last year, Honorable Speaker, this was for a period of time to go into 5 counties, and this year we've allocated now 485 million shillings. The counties are listed in the report, Honorable Speaker, that will benefit with this is basically counties like Nyandarua, where Honorable Kioni comes from, counties like Tharaka Nithi that had no county headquarters that are getting funding. I think it was for 3 years to be able to complete their county headquarters. There is a further 900 million for compensation of user fees for GON, so that members of public are able to access, and in support of the universal healthcare, to access healthcare at county hospitals without having to pay. And government of Kenya does refund the county governments for that. The road fuel levy, of course, I've mentioned a figure of 8.984, 16 million shillings short of 9 billion. Development of youth polytechnics, again, Honorable Speaker, with the massive investment that has been made by the national government in all our constituencies, or rather at least most of our constituencies, in the development of TVETs. There was to also be conditional allocations of 2 billion shillings each year, and we have done that consecutively, I think now for 3 years. So figures of about 4 to 6 billion now going to our county governments to develop youth polytechnics. Again, members of the public, members of parliament, members of our county assembly should be able to hold to account our governors and our county governments to be able to see that indeed this money is not being diverted into other things, that it is indeed going towards the development of youth polytechnics, because that was informed by the fact that we are developing TVETs at the constituency level. Therefore, you get children who will be able to access youth polytechnics and who can then be able to further their studies once you are able to do a certificate, for instance, in electrical engineering at the youth polytechnic, village youth polytechnic. You can advance that to a diploma and probably even a higher diploma level in a TVET. Therefore, if this money, Honorable Speaker, doesn't go towards the intended purpose of developing our youth polytechnics, and members of parliament must be able to ask yourselves, in your respective constituencies, how many youth polytechnics have you seen in the last year or two that we have appropriated money to, under these conditional grants, 2 billion shillings to go to the development of youth polytechnics. How many of them are being done, Honorable Speaker? Leasing of medical equipment, Honorable Speaker, 6.2 billion shillings. And there are also additional grants from donors, as I mentioned. Leasing of medical equipment. This is under the Managed Equipment Services, MES program, 6.2 billion shillings. This program has been running from the year 2015-2016. And you remember the initial allocation was 4.5 billion, which grew to 9.4 billion shillings in the last financial year, or rather this current financial year of 2018-29, and now has been scaled down to 6.2 billion in the current allocation. Again, instructively, minority whip, you may need to ask whether really we have seen value out of this MES program. We did, when we did the public participation last year, Honorable Speaker, we visited at least 12 counties. And we were shocked in some counties, Honorable Speaker, you would go and find dialysis equipment that has been put in stores because there wasn't what was called soft water. The water that was available probably in that hospital is hard water, and the dialysis machines need soft water. And the machines are there, but they are not being utilized. Questions that I hope the Auditor General and our friends in the Senate are able to put our governors to task is whether are this equipment being paid for to the vendors who have leased this equipment to government. We found cases, I remember I think in West Pokot and somewhere I think in Bungoma, where theater equipment could not be used. I think it was in West Pokot, Honorable Speaker. Theater equipment had been delivered, but the room where the equipment was to be put was not ready. Therefore, the equipment was just there. Again, these counties are paying for this equipment. In other counties, Honorable Speaker, equipment is delivered, but this equipment needs three-phase power. And we were told in some counties the equipment could not be connected, could not be utilized, because there wasn't a transformer available to provide three-phase power at a particular hospital. And people, rather, the Kenyan people, taxpayers, are still paying for this equipment, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, it will be important that even as we appropriate money to our Senate for oversight, and that's why I have encouraged members of Parliament to please support our senators in being able to access the 500 million shillings that we were able to allocate them to provide oversight over these county governments, so that your senator and the members of the county assemblies and members of the public can be able to oversight their county governments meaningfully, to be able to see that what is being paid for, Honorable Speaker, is giving value, or rather is of benefit to the people in particular counties. Honorable Speaker, moving on, the additional allocations that I've mentioned that are financed from proceeds of loans and grants from development partners are quite numerous, as enumerated in the report. But I would really want to touch on a few, Honorable Speaker, that touch on a matter that I think both this House and the Senate sought motions of adjournment to discuss, the issue of drought and famine in this country. It must not be lost on Kenyans, Honorable Speaker, that food provision, or rather agriculture, is a devolved function. And at the national level, national government level, we were left with issues to do with policy formulation, and I believe that the national government has been able to do that. And adequate resources, again, Honorable Speaker, have been devolved. And besides what we are sharing at the vertical level of equitable share between the national and the county governments, besides what each county government in this country will budget for and appropriate to their departments of agriculture in their respective counties, there are also conditional grants that have come in through loans. Loans, Honorable Speaker, that will not be repaid by the particular county governments. Loans that will be repaid by taxpayers through the national government, Honorable Speaker. And it's imperative that we also get to know, and I would beg members of Parliament to take interest, to know how many of these conditional allocations, especially those that are being financed using loans. The debate about public debt in this country is a live debate. And I listen to governors on national TV stations, MCAs, and everybody, and all commentators talking about our national debt. But nobody speaks about what is it that we can do, probably to borrow less, or how well are we utilizing the money that we are borrowing. So a lot of resources, again, are not just being borrowed by the national government for use at the national government level. A lot of resources are going down to our county governments. And I just wanted to highlight those that are under the agriculture docket because of the current situation of drought. Under the National Agriculture and Rural Inclusive Growth Project, NAGRIP, there's a figure of 7.2 billion shillings, which is a World Bank program, World Bank credit. This money, Honorable Speaker, is an additional conditional allocation for which in the financial year 2019 amounted to 1.05 billion and is expected to increase to 7.2 billion shillings in the financial year 2019-2020. This conditional allocation is meant to complement efforts by counties to increase agricultural productivity and profitability of targeted rural communities in selected counties and to provide immediate and effective response in cases of crisis or emergency. Honorable Speaker, then when you see situations like is pertaining now in Baringo, in Turkana, you must be able to ask yourself, what is it that those respective governments in those counties have done with the 1.05 billion that was allocated under this program in the last financial year or in this current financial year. And this year now we are upscaling that to 7.2 billion shillings. Honorable Speaker, under the Agricultural Sector Development Support Program, we have 849.6 million, which again is in the second year of implementation and is part of the implementation strategy of the agricultural policy for the national and county governments. In line with the agricultural policy, the overall goal of ASDSP is to contribute to transformation of crop, livestock, and fishery production into commercially oriented enterprises. And Honorable Speaker, again, talking about livestock, the counties again that are ravaged by drought and famine are counties like Baringo and Turkana where there is livestock and where these things, this amount of money again, they have benefited. Under the Drought Resilience Program in Northern Kenya, DRP&K, there's an amount of 350 million shillings. Again, Honorable Speaker, you will see areas and counties in Northern Kenya that have benefited from these funds. Honorable Speaker, there are also other funds, and I don't want to tire members by going through the entire list of all these figures. I just want to highlight but a few. But let me also highlight the urban support, the Kenya Urban Support Program, which again, last year we did allocate money, and this year under the Kenya Urban Support Program, Urban Development Grant, an additional allocation of Kenya shillings 11.5 billion. Honorable Speaker, the objective of this additional allocation is to establish and strengthen urban institutions to deliver improved infrastructure and services in participating counties in Kenya. It is again, as I said, in the second year of implementation, having started in this current financial year 2018-2019. It is meant to ensure provision of capacity building and institutional support to 47 counties. However, direct financial support will be provided to 45 counties, excluding the 2 cities of Nairobi and Mombasa, and to 59 potentially eligible urban areas within those counties. Honorable Speaker, I have seen implementation of this, at least in my county, with the proposed tarmacking of at least one road in my constituency, in Kino Ward, Wamba, Wamakema to Muthega Regen Road. But what, Honorable Speaker, I observed, one is a question of what we are speaking about, public participation in identification of projects. I have seen another project, which is a beautification program in my own constituency in Kikuyu town of a small park, that this money has been allocated to beautification of a small park that the county government would have been able to do with their own resources and allocate more of these donor funds to what will give better value. For instance, the upgrade of roads, like they have done in Kino Ward. And Honorable Speaker, I want members of Parliament and also members of the public to take keen interest, because this is money that has been accessed, this 11.5 billion from the World Bank. Is not free money. It is not a grant. It is money that the Kenyan people will pay back. And it is the national governments that will have to pay. It is taxpayers that will pay. And therefore, members of public must have a keen interest on how their governors and their respective county governments are allocating this money and ensure that there is indeed active public participation in the identification of those projects. There is active social accountability in how this money is utilized and use of social audits by members of the public. And they can only be able to do that if they are engaged at inception, at the time of identifying the projects that will be implemented. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, I want to conclude by just highlighting a few of the observations that the committee observed as we finalized our work on this division of revenue bill, Honorable Speaker. And top among those observations, Honorable Speaker, was the issue of those conditional allocations or special allocations. And we did observe that with these special allocations in the conditional grants, and in order to ensure that there is value for money, as I'm saying, Honorable Speaker, there is need for an enhanced role of the legislature. And when we speak about the legislature, Honorable Speaker, we want to speak about the legislature at the national level, both as members of parliament, our senators, and that is why, again, I implore on members of parliament to support the allocation or the appropriation of an amount of money to our senators to be able to offer meaningful oversight. And also, the legislature in our county assemblies to be able to empower them and give them capacity to offer meaningful oversight without being necessarily being intimidated by governors. As such, Honorable Speaker, at the national level, National Assembly level, the committee, that's the Budget and Appropriations Committee, we have committed ourselves that during the next public hearings, we will endeavor to visit some of the counties that are benefiting from these special allocations and conditional grants to be able to evaluate the value for money of such conditional grants to assess whether we have achieved our targets as per the proposals and justification that formed the basis for resource allocation of these areas, to these areas, Honorable Speaker. And as I said, that is what we did in the last financial year during the public participation. We were able to look at least on under the MES program, whether we are really getting value for money under this program. And we also identify a few of these areas that are benefiting from these conditional grants. We may be able to look at those that are benefiting from the agricultural support programs, those that are benefiting from the urban support program, and be able to evaluate really whether these conditional grants and special funds are going into meaningful use for the public. So that if they are not able to utilize this money properly under the county government structures, for instance, under the urban support program, there is no harm, again, if our county governments are not able to implement these projects well. The ministries could also implement those projects like they did under what was then christened the NAMSIP program, the Nairobi Metropolitan programs that were done, I think, 2 years ago. Again, a fund that was funded by the World Bank. Honorable Speaker, the committee also notes that over the years, substantial resources have been transferred to both the national government and also to the counties in line with the constitutional imperative of resourcing devolved functions. However, and on account of the Auditor General's reports, the Controller of Budget reports also, and indeed parliamentary reports, there is concern of also growing fiduciary risks on county resources due to misapplication and mismanagement of scarce county resources, which, if left unchecked, Honorable Speaker, may curtail the very essence why Kenyans voted in our 2010 constitution to have a devolved structure of government. And we want to believe, Honorable Speaker, that if we are able to mitigate on this fiduciary risk, we can indeed see the people of Kenya enjoy the true fruits of devolution and why they voted for a devolved structure of government in the year 2010. Honorable Speaker, it is important also to remind the House and the country at large, Honorable Speaker, that indeed all the monies being allocated to our county governments, Honorable Speaker, is money that should also be oversighted at the county level, besides that, the oversight that is done at the Senate level. Because it has become the norm now that I think most of our MCAs believe that oversight should be done only at the Senate level. But that other second layer of oversight, the first and primary layer of oversight of county government funds should be in our county assemblies. And it's imperative, Honorable Speaker, that we continue to build capacity in our county assemblies, both with the caliber of members that are elected into our county assemblies and also in terms of their intellectual capacity also, Honorable Speaker, to be able to offer meaningful oversight of our county governors. I am happy, Honorable Speaker, that some of our county assemblies have started being assertive and holding their positions in terms of being able to oversight. I have seen some in my county. I have seen some in the county of Mombasa being very assertive, and that is the way to go, even as we encourage them to continue offering meaningful oversight in our county governments. Honorable Speaker, the committee therefore recommends that this House approves the bill as follows. That one, the national government, this is on the equitable share, the vertical share of revenue, the national government gets Kenya shillings 1,561,416,000,000, and county allocations be Kenya shillings 310 billion. Mr. Speaker, the committee requests the House to approve the Division of Revenue Bill 2019 and it now be read a second time. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I want to request the one and only Dr. Makali Mulu, a very active member of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, to second. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Dr. Makali Mulu, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I raise to second this motion on Division Revenue Bill. And Honorable Speaker, I must thank my Chairman of the Budget Committee, for that detailed moving of the motion. I think he has said most of the things relating to this bill. And Honorable Speaker, you realize this bill is almost to 90%, almost 100% informed by the budget policy statement. It's actually an extraction from the budget policy statement, where we are just now extracting the figures from the state policy statement and showing clearly in this bill how the money will be shared vertically. Vertically meaning between the two levels of government. And Honorable Speaker, my chairman has said that in terms of how the money will be shared, in terms of the figures, the national government will take about 1.56 trillion, while the county governments will take about 310 billion. That is the equitable share. But after including the conditional grants, then that will move the figure for the county governments to 371 billion. Honorable Chair, you realize that last year when we were debating this bill, Division of Revenue Bill, it was very easy to debate it, and it made our work very easy, because at that time, through IBEC, there was an agreement between the county government and the national government in terms of the figures. There was a negotiated figure. So it made our work very easy. But this time, from our interaction with the Council of Governors, it was clear that they have not agreed on the figure of 310. But as a budget committee, after consideration of what is happening in the country, we settled on 310. That's what my chairman has proposed. And there are high chances, Honorable Speaker, that then there will be further negotiation on these figures. But for now, that's the figures we have proposed. But Honorable Speaker, let me just, as my chairman said, make a few observations relating to these figures. Honorable Speaker, this House has been very, very generous to both the national government and the county government in terms of appropriating resources and with not much follow-up. And I think, Honorable Speaker, what we need now, this time, Honorable Speaker, is to make sure that this House takes the work of following up on resources
which have been appropriated in a more serious manner. Why am I saying that, Honorable Speaker? Honorable Speaker, I just want to get a few examples of the grants, the conditional grants the national government has been able to allocate to the county governments. Honorable Speaker, if you look at the money we are allocating to construction of county government headquarters, last year, I think of about 600 million was allocated so that we help in construction of 5 county headquarters in 5 counties. Those are counties which were not able to kind of find offices which had already been constructed by the time they become county governments. And this year, Honorable members of this house, is how many of us in this house are aware of the status of this county government headquarters after pumping 600 million last year. More likely, you'll even find that the members of parliament from those counties might not have seen anything. But here we are as a house allocating more money. So what are we saying? We are saying, honorable members, it is important that even as we approve these figures, we get progress reports or status report of most of these areas where we are putting money. The other area I want to pick, Honorable Speaker, is the area of development of youth polytechnics, where we have allocated 2 billion, Honorable Speaker, to be shared in all the counties, of 47 counties. And this money is targeted at improving what we call polytechnics, youth polytechnics, and which are now being called kind of vocational training institutions. So we pumped 2 billion last year, and I think now this is the 3rd year we are pumping 2 billion. But I don't know how many honorable members are able to say in their areas they have seen some improvement in these youth polytechnics. And the whole idea was to make sure that those who don't go to university, those who don't go to the secondary schools, or those who don't do well in the secondary schools have an alternative where they can actually go and kind of get practical skills which can be used to also make sure that they have some money for their families. So it's still another problem that we are allocating money, but not much has been done in terms of following up. So, Honorable Speaker, I still want to say that as a House, even as we approve this division of revenue, it is important that we make sure that we have a monitoring and evaluation framework to continue following up on the money. The other area is the leasing of medical equipment. You realize, honorable members, initially we used to allocate 4.5 billion every year. We moved to 9.4. Now we have moved back to 6.2. When you try to find out what are the reasons that we are now moving back, you realize it's because there are challenges with implementation. These challenges need to be documented and shared with the honorable members so that even as we continue allocating this money, we are sure Kenyans are getting value for money. And I would wish a department like the committee in charge of Ministry of Health, Departmental Committee on Health, this is an area they could spend most of their time, or much of their time, to go and see what is happening on the ground, so that they are able to advise this House whether there is need to continue allocating more money. I would want to say, during our interaction with that committee, we are happy that they were able to mention that the challenge is being faced. But now, they need to intensify that monitoring. We don't have to wait till problems are there and then we go. I think we need to be proactive, that committees can come up with schedules to go to their constituencies, to the counties, and see what is happening on the ground, and out of that give this House status report, so that that report will supplement the report of control of budget, who normally presents figures. There's minimum in terms of fiscal implementation. It's more of financial expenditure. So, Mr. Speaker, that's another area. The other area, Honorable Speaker, there is also money set for capacity building for counties. And anytime I sit and interact with the counties, and anytime I look at the Auditor General reports, you ask yourself whether this capacity has really any positive impact towards improving performance of counties. And I think since the money has been set here, and some are loans, others are grants, and honorable members, we need really to thank our development partners who are going that extra mile to support counties so that they are able to engage in proper use of resources. So despite the fact that money is there, and this money has been there for the last 3 years, to build their capacity, we expect as a house to see reduced in terms of queries from the Auditor General, to see a reduced volume of those questions, so that at the end of the day, we can say that this capacity building is adding value to the whole process. The project of Kenya Urban Support Program, this is a program which is targeted at improving what we used to call municipalities under the old constitution. The municipalities now have been given resources so that the infrastructure within the municipalities can now be improved. But what is happening, honorable members? I'm sure most of you might not be aware. You realize that what the governors have done, because they're supposed to appoint the management boards for this fund, there's what they call the Town Management Board or Urban Centers Management Board. What is happening, honorable members? Instead of getting people who are competent to oversee, to supervise implementation of this particular important program, they are getting their cronies and friends, some who don't even have basic qualification to manage such a huge portfolio. And at the end of the day, what is happening is, honorable members, our so-called municipal councils or municipalities remain the same way they used to be under the old constitution. So I think, honorable members, we want to urge the governors and most of the county assemblies to make sure that even as they do their oversight, they are able to make sure these management boards of the urban centers are composed of people who are very qualified and who can add value. As I conclude, because I can see my time is running out, Mr. Honorable Speaker, this house has also been allocating resources towards what we call regional cancer centers, which are supposed to be referral. Regional cancer referral centers. So
yes, 30 seconds. Yes, one minute at most.
Yeah, so I was just saying for these cancer centers, we need also to make sure that they're actually implemented so that our people can now stop suffering from cancer, which is a very serious disease. So with those remarks, Honorable Speaker, I second this motion.
Very well. Honorable members, I wish to propose a question, which is that the Division of Revenue Bill, National Assembly Bill number 11 of 2019 be now led a second time. Shall we start with Honorable Kioni?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to speak to this bill, to this motion dealing with a very important matter on allocation of revenue in this country. Mr. Speaker, I want to first of all thank the committee for the work that they have done and even the clarity with which they present the reports to us. Mr. Speaker, even as I speak, I think it is important to note that when we come to talking about this allocation of money among the two levels of government, members of this House seem to have a lot of interest in it, but away from the House. And as I was thinking, wondering why, I think we need to do some bit of civic education, Mr. Speaker, on the role of the National Assembly and even of the Senate when it comes to these issues, and especially when it comes to our new constitution. I say new because we still have a few of us who are still operating under the old framework. We have a role to play as the National Assembly. Other than just allocating resources or approving this bill, Mr. Speaker, we need to be careful. There is a lot of money that is going directly to the county governments. The grants that have been led to us by the chairman, Mheshimiwa Ichung'wa, literally calls for a thorough oversight role that we are not doing. And I think the thing that goes through our mind is that once money has gone to the county, we have no role in oversighting
And perhaps even the county government also sees us as intruders when we ask questions on what is happening. But there is so much money that is going directly to the county in form of grants. Even if you were to leave out the money that they have to budget for, the 310. For example, Mr. Speaker, we have 9 billion shillings being road levy fund. When we don't pay attention to how this money is being spent on the ground, then we are opening room for misuse. And Mr. Speaker, I think as members of the National Assembly, I do not know how, but we have to play a better role, a bigger role in oversighting the use of these funds. I know some people may say that we are overstepping our mandate, but Mr. Speaker, if we had no role to play, I think then we would not have been given a law to allocate these funds in the first place. You cannot allocate funds and then be locked out from oversighting how the funds are being used. Mr. Speaker, the other thing that I want to mention as I support this bill, the chairman did mention that there is a likelihood that it will end up before the mediation committee. And I see that the mediation committee is provided for under the Constitution. I think Article 113, yes, 113, and Article 113.1 provides that the speakers will constitute the mediation committee on equal numbers. While that is a provision in the Constitution, I think it's something that we will also need to address ourselves. Mr. Speaker, this House has 349 members. The Senate has 67 members. When you say equal numbers, I think there is something that is not adding up. I think the proper thing should be on a pro rata basis, so that our representative role makes a meaning. When you say equal numbers, you may bring the whole Senate, 67 of them, and 67 from the National Assembly. I think there is something that we may need to address going forward. Even as we talk about referendum, we need to be, I think we need to address that issue. I don't think it is a fair thing to say equal numbers. Mr. Speaker, let me also say that one of the things that came out when the devolution conference was going on at Kirinyaga, I think 2 weeks ago, is that the role of the National Assembly, the National Assembly is not being seen as a stakeholder in the devolution exercise in our country, or in enhancing the effectiveness of devolution in our country. And I think it is important that we start asserting ourselves as members of the National Assembly. If we do not do so, I don't see us growing devolution any further from where it is. The amount of money that has been given to the county governments through grants is so much that as people who are oversighting the money at the national level, we also need to know this money that is going directly in form of grants, how is it being used? Is it possible that roads that we are handling at Dakera are also being handled under the 9 billion shillings levy? Is it possible that the 310 billion shillings being sent to the county is only used for revenue, current revenue, or to cater for current expenditures as opposed to development, because they have enough money to do development and cover it up by saying that this is the amount of money that we have been given. I think some of the counties are just using the 310 billion for current expenditure and perhaps nothing for development. Mr. Speaker, also, this calls also for us to look at the oversighting that is being done. Are we confident that our MCAs are able to oversight these governors? Is it possible that some of the governors are too way up in terms of academic qualifications that our MCAs may be intimidated when it comes to oversighting? What role is being played by the nominated members of the county assembly? Are they helping in the oversighting, or are they stifling the oversighting law that was supposed to have been done by the MCA? Mr. Speaker, looking at the report, let me just talk about a few of these issues. One is that I see some money has been set aside for the issue of the water tower protection and climate change mitigation, and the program. 495 million shillings. It's meant to benefit the Cheragan Hills and Mount Elgon, a little bit of Lake Victoria. Mr. Speaker, I would have been happier to see also the Abadeas covered under this program, because it's also another important water tower that is also wasting away. If it is not given attention, we are likely to suffer as a country. Drought resilience program in northern Kenya, Mr. Speaker, including Laikipia County in this program, will be useful. Parts of Nyandarua and especially Daragwa constituency suffers the same kind of climatic condition as parts of northern Kenya. Mr. Speaker, there is also the issue of one of the recommendations. I'm having a problem with the ink that was used here. The recommendations that has been given to us by the committee, or the recommendations arrived at by the committee, or observations, they are talking about, I've talked about the oversighting role, but there is the issue of misappropriation and mismanagement. Mr. Speaker, this is real. I know there is a lot of concentration on what the levels of corruption at the national government, but we need to encourage the agencies concerned to pay more attention at the county level. It's been observed by this committee. The Auditor General has over time highlighted that there is, without doubt, cases of misapplication and mismanagement of the resources that are being taken to the county level. And now we have the grants. These grants that are going, and the county assembly may not even catch wind of what is happening. They may think it is the 310 million shillings that is being used in various places. This needs to be brought out. And if there is no civic education that is being given to the Kenyans, we will lose out on this. Even as members of the National Assembly, we are a handful of us here who have heard what the chairman has said. If again, I didn't know of this myself, that we have so much money going in form of grants to Nyandarua County. And I know my Governor Kimemia will be very happy if I am asleep when these things are being said, because you know what to do when we are still asleep. Again, Mr. Speaker, as I finish, 50 to 80% of the funds being given to the county is going to waste. This is ridiculous. We need to pay attention when we are doing our oversighting law. Mr. Speaker, I support, but we need to commend the committee for the work they have done, and also waking us up as to what we should do in our oversight responsibility. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let's have Honorable Ochanda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a closer look at this bill, really one will want to ask why we really get to mediation stages. Because in the past, this has been the trend. The Senate has been going with exactly the figures of Revenue Allocation Commission. And if you look at this thing critically, you really wonder what is really happening. Because for sure, what we have, or in terms of the vertical revenue placement, there are these nominal figures. The 310 is nominal, and Revenue Allocation Commission is talking about 335. This is really nominal. But if you look at it in that manner, you realize that over and above the nominal, which is now 310, that is in this bill, over and above it, there is 61 or so billion on top. And this is one thing that we really need to look at, so that as we move forward, it will help us a great deal in terms of saving time, in terms of back and forth for purpose of looking at the revenue division bill. Instead of constantly looking at only the nominal figures, we really need to look at beyond the nominal in terms of what else goes to the counties, because that else that goes to the counties is much more. If you look at it critically, like I've mentioned, you realize that World Bank alone is sending out 20 billion across counties in the name of credits, in names of loans and grants. And that is over and above what we are talking about. And this is going to agriculture, it's going to water, it's going to all manner of other things that we are talking about that are devolved. So when we're talking about 310, let's insist that it's nominal. And I think even the term that we are using really needs to indicate that it's nominal, such that some of these figures are looked at properly. We are talking about the headquarters. Last year to this year, they are spending 1 billion shillings. So when last year we are going to the issues of mediation, nobody had thought that, no, there is money that is going, 1 billion shillings, that is going actually to building the headquarters of the counties that didn't have headquarters. Meaning that those counties themselves are not using their own money to do their own headquarters. Money is coming from Nairobi to help the 5 do their headquarters. I think some of these things are really need to be looked at properly. You look at the proposal that is brought forward, for example, by Revenue Allocation Commission. They look at 10 billion on issues of grants or conditional grants. And these are they are placing, number one, it should supposed to be going to the urban and the urban areas or cities. And then the other 5 billion is supposed to be going for issues of regional center or cancer centers, setting up those regional cancer centers. Now, they are proposing 335. We are proposing 310. So out of 335, if you remove the 10, then we'll be talking about the 325. So the 10, what are they talking about? The 10, the 5 that they are talking about are supposed to go for purposes of enhancing the cities in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of what they are doing. There are grants already in here totaling to 11 billion that is going to the cities and urban areas. So why do we need to add 5? And yet, the 11 billion that I'm talking about are supposed to be bringing out some results that are measurable. Say that if you are talking about adding more money, you need to add more money in terms of what is the experience. How much have we generated? How much has gone into what areas, particularly when it comes to issues of enhancing the capacities of the urban areas and cities? How much has gone into the infrastructure? What are we seeing that has improved before we talk of adding another 5 billion? The other 5 billion that they are talking about are for purposes of setting up regional cancer centers. There's been a big controversy in this country for the last 3, 4, 5 years in terms of the monies that are spent on health. In this document, we are still using 9 billion to repay for equipments that were leased. And over and above that, the Revenue Allocation Commission is still proposing that we add another 5 from setting up some of these things. Yet we have a bad experience. So in my view, Mr. Speaker, before we get into some of these things, and before even the Senate looks at this thing, some proper attention needs to be given to what is asked for. The 10 billion that is asked for, in my view, does not make sense because there is no way we are still struggling with the 9 billion. The equipments are not being used in any meaningful sense. Some are lying idle. My county, I had received theirs last week, and they've been repaying. We've been repaying for the last 2 years. So I think there's some of these things that are still really not very right. The other thing that, Mr. Speaker, is important that we look at, where is the money going to at the counties? Where is it going to? As at now, it's clear that over 70% of the money is going largely to recurrent and wage bill. If you look at this, the wage bill thing in the counties, you realize that, and I've said this over and over again here, that there are minimum 3 parallel civil service lines in the counties, minimum. Others have 4, because they inherited the former local authorities. That's a civil service with own CBA, with their own payment arrangements, and which is even higher than the ones of the civil servants that were seconded. So I'm saying the second one was the seconded line ministries. It's another parallel line. Then there are those that were hired by the first governors, a parallel line. Then there are those that are now hired by the second generation governors, those who are there coming in for the first time. So we are talking about 4 different parallel civil lines. What is happening in this country that we cannot put all these things into one, such that we have one clear service line for county governments? This is where all the money is going to. We have many. A governor confessed, the chair of the Council of Governors confessed to the committee that he has more than 100 drivers who are brought in by virtue of being drivers of the former local authorities, the defunct local authorities, and there's no way he can chase them away, yet they earn more money, and many of them cannot read and write, are illiterate. That was a confession that we had. So why spend money in that kind of a direction when we know we have a big problem? So the wage bill is a big issue, particularly at the county level, that we need to put together all these 3 different parallel civil service lines into one, such that we can have more money for purposes of services, we can have more money for purposes of developing our areas. As I say that, there are two things that I wanted to bring around, Mr. Speaker, as issues of caveat. Number one is the issue of youth polytechnics. Where we are at the moment, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Education had declared that everybody who is in class 8 goes to Form 1. That means that there's nobody going to a youth polytechnic. If you get to Form 4, the minister again declared that if you have an E, you go to a TTI. So where is the place of this youth village polytechnics where we are placing 2 billion shillings on? It means that in future, we are trying to place money on something that's going to be non-existent. That's one question that I wanted to bring around, that as we place 2 billion for purposes of conditional grants to youth polytechnics in the villages, we need to know that the youth polytechnics now has no catchment wing. There's no source for their students. Their source has been mused, has been closed by 100% transition, and has also been closed by the TTIs that we are coming up with. Then the other thing that, a question that I wanted to bring around is, Mr. Speaker, we are talking about these grants, and they're adding to 61 billion, and they are going to the counties. Do we have, or are counties aware that this thing is spread to the 47? Or we are talking about 61 that are only benefiting less than 20 counties. Yet, on the other hand, I'm talking about a nominal fund plus grants and loans, which may only be going to a few countries, yet we are punishing other counties that are not benefiting from this. What I'm trying to say is that the Council of Governors, the chair, and the counties, specific counties individually, needs to cross-check where are they in the 61 billion shillings that we are saying is going as grants, is going as loans. Where is my county, for example, when it comes to the World Bank 7.2 that's going to agriculture? Is it there or it is not there? Because here I'm saying that they should not be given more money in the belief and in the understanding that they are benefiting. So if it gets to the reverse, that they are not, what is happening? So we need a clear indication in terms of the 61 billion that we are talking about. Which counties is it going to and which ones are not benefiting? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We shall now have Honorable Tonui Kiprotich. Is that member present? Yes. Honorable
Very
Tonui.
much present. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to also comment on the Division of Revenue Bill, which I don't agree with, because I believe most of the functions which are in the Constitution, the key ones which are touching on the members of the public, are devolved. And it could be very important to devolve more funds to the counties so that the people can be served at that level. I want also to state that I don't agree with what many of my colleagues have stated, that the counties are poorly oversighted. I tend to believe that the MCAs are doing better oversight than us here at the National Assembly. Right now we are talking about very, very important bill, but you can count the number seated here to follow up on this bill. We have quite a number of questions which you have raised. Me personally, I have nearly 6, 7 in the Romade, but it rarely reaches the floor of this House. We only see about 3, 4 questions being raised here. So oversight for the national government is very, very poor. The one for the county is much better off. In fact, the MCAs nearly understand each and every item in their appeal whenever I interact with them. So that misconception, those misleading statements, we should not continue entertaining. Then, coming back to this bill, this is a division of revenue bill. But when you go through this bill, because I believe division of revenue is meant to divide money between the national government and the county governments. But what we have here is a division of revenue bill. I believe it could better be called county revenue breakdown, because you hardly see the other side of the national government. All you have in this bill is one side, dealing with the counties. It doesn't deal with the breakdown of the national government. That we have 1.5 billion go to the national government, no breakdown. But on terms of the county government, there is some breakdown. So I believe in this bill from the onset is highly misleading and is not properly drafted. That is according to my simple understanding of this bill. Now going down to the details which are there in this bill, especially on the side of the counties, we have what we call the funds for leasing of equipments, which is allocated 6.2 billion, which I believe those were among those ill-conceived projects by the national government. Possibly this is part of the scam which needs to be investigated by DCI, how it was arrived at. When we approved this in the last parliament, we were made to understand it was going to be a constant 95 million shillings per year per county. But I understand at the moment it has now skyrocketed to 200 million shillings per county per annum. This, as we understand from the governors, that they have inquired about the same equipments, and they have stated they can buy even at 10% of the cost which we are going to be spending in leasing these equipments which we are not going to be owning, which if they could be allowed to purchase directly, they can spend just 10% of that to buy those equipments. So this is a scam. This is meant only to enrich some people. So this 6.2 is already misappropriated. We are rubber stamping here. That's why we are saying this is not a good house in terms of oversight. And I'm very sure the numbers now that we don't have the minority side, opposition side, all of us were in government. I believe after this we will be ready to rubber stamp. That is why even when you see the order paper, immediately after we discuss this, we are supposed to move to the committee of the whole house. That shows the mindset of even those who make the order paper, that this house will simply move from this before even they propose any amendments. We have gone again to the third reading. So that is one. Two.
Order to know.
Freedom of expression.
Well, there's freedom, of course. You are a member, you have a right to speak to what you are speaking, but the freedom has limitations also. So the order paper is made after the decisions are made by the House Business Committee. So please, don't linger there.
No, I was referring to the mindset of that House Business Committee, that he thinks this house is a house of rubber stamp, that we don't debate.
Order. That is not order, Honorable Tunoi. Please, don't linger there. Proceed beyond that point, because we're going to raise uncharted waters.
It's okay. The message sent. Thank you. On the issue of level 5 hospitals, where we are proposing that 4.2 billion needs to be allocated, we need to understand very well that majorly the issues of health are dealt with at the county level. At the national level, we only have, I believe, about 5 facilities, 5 institutions. Kenyatta National Hospital, we have Moi Referral Hospital, we have Mathare Mental Hospital, and spinal cord, spinal injury hospital. The rest from the health center, which are millions or thousands, dispensaries, the sub-county hospitals, and the county referral hospitals, all of that serve, I believe, 95% of Kenyans. And those ones we are allocating very little resources and leaving about 60 billion to 70 billion shillings to remain at the national level to take care of only 4 institutions, which I believe is quite unfair. That is why we have cases of even importing the mobile clinics at a cost of 5 billion, which was queried by Auditor General, because there's lots of idle money at the national government, which should have been devolved to the county governments to serve the people at the ground level. This is quite unfair. What we need to do is to have referral hospitals in each, a national referral hospital in each county, so that these 60 billion, this 70 billion, which remains with the Ministry of Health, can be used to serve our people. Otherwise, the money which remains at the national government level is only meant for cartels. So the little money which goes to the county is being used to serve the people. That is why sometimes there's shortage of medicines in our dispensaries, in our health centers, simply because we are letting lots of money remain at the half house and very little funds to go to the county level. So that one needs to be announced to take care of our people at the lower level. On the issue of youth polytechnics, we are allocating 2 billion shillings, which I do support. That it's important to develop skills, although I may not necessarily agree with the figures allocated, 2 billion. I tend to believe it's too low, and we may need to enhance it because this is a very important sector, skill and development, so that our people can engage in job creation, self-employment, and such. On the issue of fuel levy fund, we are transferring about 8.9 billion. This will assist in improvement of roads. This is one of the key functions which is at the county level, the roads. When I talk about my constituency, most of the roads are marramed, which are done by KERA, a little of it, a bit of it by county. But the roads have improved under devolved government. So this needs also to be added. Then come to the issue of the county headquarters. There is an allocation of 485 million. I am certain that this is a very discriminatory allocation. Bomet as a county did not inherit any headquarters and is excluded from this list. And now that this bill is being rushed before we can double amendments, then that may not be captured. This one needs to be looked into. I would wish the chair of the budget committee can come with some amendments so that they can include Bomet to benefit from this allocation so that the headquarters can be built. Currently, the county.
Very well. Honorable Tonui, your space is gone. Honorable Nakara Lodepe, member for Turkana Central. I doubt you're on record. Just checking that mic. Use the next one.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, first of all, I want to thank the committee for the work they have done. They have tried their best. But, Honorable Speaker, I want to challenge those who are saying that we have given a lot of money to the counties. Honorable Speaker, 310 billion is not small money, but it's not equal to the services that we have devolved to the counties. Honorable Speaker, many services that we have involved are those who are actually targeting the common mwananchi. And that's why we are always competing in this house, that we need to see the budget allocated to the counties are much bigger than what we have given them. We are complaining that the counties are not doing anything. But compared to the budget that we have given them, Honorable Speaker, we cannot blame them. By saying that, Honorable Speaker, I want to agree that though there are some wastage in the counties, there are some counties which have changed the lifestyle of their people and even the environment and even infrastructure, which we need to encourage them by giving them more resources. Honorable Speaker, when you talk about roads, we have what we call the feeder roads. Feeder roads are the roads that bring transportation into the major towns. And these are the roads that can make the businesses around the county to grow because they are feeding the headquarters of the county. And by doing so, Honorable Speaker, we realize that the development of that particular county is getting rapid because of the feeder roads. And we want to encourage the county governments to make sure that these feeder roads are coming from all the corners of the county so that they can come to the headquarters, get the goods, and take back to the rural areas where people need those goods, Honorable Speaker. On the issue of the hospital, Honorable Speaker, I agree with the members who have said that we need our hospital to be full of drugs. Because, Honorable Speaker, surely, if you go to some areas where there are no level 5 hospitals, where there are no early centers, people depend on private clinics or churches, early centers. The county government must partner with churches and NGOs that are offering medical services to the community and give them trucks because they cannot afford to build health centers all over the county. But there are some churches, there are some organizations who are already existing and are giving those services to the community. We need to see the partnership between the county government and those private sectors who are offering those services at the raw cost. Give them more trucks so that they can give to the patient. Honorable Speaker, on the issue of youth polytechnics, I agree, because we need such kind of polytechnics in our counties so that we can create job opportunities for our youth. The youth need to get those skills like carpentry, masonry, so that they can be self-employed. No, we have no jobs now in this country, Honorable Speaker. And the only way we can make our youth engaged and busy is by taking them to these polytechnics. And I agree the way they have said that even if you get a D, you can go to any polytechnic, take a course. And after that course, one thing that we need, Honorable Speaker, after this course, we need also to give them the instrument or the equipment to use for their jobs. Because when you have gotten the training and you go now outside without those equipment to help you to do jobs, you can still remain unemployed. So let's encourage the government, after somebody has received the skills, we must also give them apparatus so that they can go out there and now do things by themselves. They can go to the village, they can go to towns, and they can do just by themselves, Honorable Speaker. So we need to increase such kind of budget because that's where youth, majority of youth lies. But we need to increase that budget. Though we have given 2 billion, but Honorable Speaker, maybe we need to increase later on. The issue of leasing of medical equipment. Honorable Speaker, some counties are paying this, and yet they have never even tried this equipment in the hospitals. They are still lying there, and yet we are still paying them a lot of money, and we have not used them, Honorable Speaker. We need to challenge the counties which have not put this equipment into practice to put them. There's no use for us to pay this, and yet they are not in use. So, Honorable Speaker, we need to challenge our counties that we need to use this equipment so that our people can get services. Honorable Speaker, on the issue of supporting the senators to do the oversight, it's a good idea, Honorable Speaker, because we need to see this money being used well. When we deny the senator the money to do the oversight, it's like we are telling them, you have no responsibility, you have no role in the devolution. And yet the Senate is where the devolution is being manufactured, it's where devolution is being made. So we need to support them, give them some money so that they can do the oversight, because they are the one who actually run all over the county. You know, a member of parliament, you go only oversight within your only constituency, but the senator can go all over the county. So, Honorable Speaker, I support that so that at least we can see senators doing something, not only debating in the House, using a lot of English in the House, and yet they don't put those things into practice. So if you leave them idle like that, and we know most of them are old again, Honorable Speaker, we'll make them passive, and they cannot be active in their role. So I support that we need to give them some money to do the oversight. Honorable Speaker, on the issue of the drought and famine, Honorable Speaker, you know what's going on in this country now. Some part of this country, people are dying. We cannot ignore that. We cannot deny that. Honorable Speaker, when this money is being given at this particular hour, already people are dying, and we are now debating on this amount still in our pocket, still in national government, and we are blaming county governments that they are not doing anything, and yet their money is still here. So, Honorable Speaker, we need some time to see such kind of money must be taken a bit early, so that when a calamity comes, this money must be there already to be used, so that we don't blame the county government all the time. Some of them are saying we don't have the money because the money is still with us here. So, Honorable Speaker, as the chairman said, we need to pass this bill very quickly so that the county can get money. I agree. Honorable Speaker, on the issue of urban support program, I agree. We need to urbanize our villages. We need to see urbanization in our counties so that we can see the changes before devolution and now we have devolution. And that will tell us that devolution is good. When you see a village getting urbanized, when you see a village with running water, when you see a village with tarmac roads, when you see a village with telephone, when you see the village with electricity, you can say, surely, we are now enjoying the fruits of devolution. So this program, Honorable Speaker, I support it. But we need to see that this program goes into outside major towns to areas where people need to see the difference now that we have devolution in this country. Honorable Speaker, on the observation that the chairman raised here on the issue of the conditional allocations, surely, as one of the members said, we need county assemblies to see how these grants are being used. We need to see these conditional allocations, how are being used, how are being neutralized by our counties. Finally, Honorable Speaker, as we give this money to the national government and county governments, what we need to see, Honorable Speaker, is value of the money. The services that we are giving to our people, is it equal to the money that we are giving out, or we are getting undervalued services? Number two, Honorable Speaker, we need to give money most of to the programs that change the living standards of our people. Finally, Honorable Speaker, we need to target the program that improve the economy and also make our county food secured. Like now, Honorable Speaker, we are crying of hunger in some parts of this country, and yet some places we have a lot of food. Honorable Speaker, we need to allocate a lot of money to those programs that can make our country food secured. I support. Thank you.
Very well. Let's have Honorable Kamuren Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I raise to support this Division of Revenue Bill 2019, and I want first of all to congratulate this committee for the good work that they have done. Mr. Speaker, these allocations might look like there are a lot of money that is given to the counties. But in my own view, Honorable Speaker, is that this money might not be enough, specifically due to the challenges that are there. You know, these are devolved governments, and there are so many challenges because they are always closer to the people, and there is more demand and the challenges that are there. But because of the situation that this country is at the moment, we will have to go the way it is. But in future, there is need for more allocation. Mr. Speaker, on this bill, I am seeing several items that has been given allocations, which is relating more so to agriculture. I'm seeing National Agriculture and Rural Inclusive Growth Project. It is being allocated 7.2 billion. Same to agriculture sector development support program, which is given 849.6 million. Same to the drought program in northern Kenya, allocated 350 million. Same to Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project, which is allocated 3.6 billion. When you add the total, it goes to 11.996 billion. All this is related to agriculture. And at the moment, what is happening in this country that people are lacking food to the extent that is going on at the moment, including also my constituency, Baringo South, that we are really lacking, and there is a lot of problems related with food security. And that is why we are calling upon the government to support us. If we have such allocation, I think the major objective of this allocation is to improve production towards getting production in terms of food so that we can sustain and take care of our people. Mr. Speaker, it is worrying that we can allocate such a money and we still have people who are suffering because of lack of food, and we are allocating good amount. That means there is a cap in terms of implementation of these proposals, in terms of implementation of production, farming, and so forth. I am aware, and that is what is going on. I don't know in other constituencies, but I know we are even lacking extension agriculture officers who are supposed to be going around and educating people on what to do and how to farm and how they can produce well in their farms. Mr. Speaker, I think there is a cap in terms of oversight. So we don't get value of this money, and we need to improve that. And also, any idea that comes should be originating from the farmers themselves, so that they own and sustain every new technology and every new approach of farming. Like the other day in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, we were able to identify 14 irrigation schemes, including Parkira National Irrigation Scheme, which is a national irrigation. It's run nationally. We have others, several of them. Mokutane, we have Arabal, which is in Bosos. We have Sandai, we have Kamoskoi, we have several others. But the planning and the money allocated to these 14 irrigation schemes is what we are lacking. When you go to Parkera, still we have a lot of challenges in this national irrigation scheme. I appreciate what the PS is doing at the moment because he sent a team. But I'm worried that this money that is allocated, how much will be allocated to such irrigation schemes? Because if it will not be allocated enough money, that means next year again, we shall face the same problem, that we shall not have food, we shall be affected, and we shall be again calling upon the government, while the farmers are willing at the moment to do well and produce food that will be enough for them and also to give to other Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, I support the additional conditional allocation for rehabilitation of the youths, specifically polytechnics. I'm seeing 2 billion is allocated there, and I wish this money is well allocated when it goes to the counties. It should be shared equally amongst the constituencies, so that those who are having polytechnics can improve and rehabilitate it. Because we have got so many youths, Mr. Speaker, that have not gotten opportunities of going to these other colleges. And there are so many in the villages. So they need to have these skills so that they can sustain their lives and earn a living. For example, Mr. Speaker, we are having Marikat Vocational Center. That is the only vocational center that is assisting youths in my constituency, and it's a very old vocational center. But when you go and see the condition, it is worrying. And I am seeing 2 billion being allocated. And I know last year there was also some amount, this year now, and it is wonderful because if these things are not shared equally, you get some other consequences and other rehabilitation polytechnics are not allocated enough money. And Marikat Vocational Training Center needs a very little amount, to a tune of 29 million is needed. And it will absorb almost almost 1,000 youths. But that money is not there. We were also intending to start Ramaja Vocational Training College, Sandai Vocational Training College, Mokoswak, and Sokon Polytechnics. But where is the money? But I believe these 2 billion will come to our rescue. Mr. Speaker, there is a lot for our Kenyans to understand that this money is their money. Because it's like the mood in this country at the moment, Honorable Speaker, is that they only wait for the Auditor General to give the report of audited accounts. And you will see so many Kenyans through social media reacting on that. But the Kenyans themselves, they don't take their role as citizens and follow up these allocations. They fail in their duties. So there is a need of public participation for the county governments to educate people to value their money and take care of their projects. As contractors are being given these activities or construction work to start, they should also monitor from the word go, from the foundation all through, so that they own this process and they can sustain. So there is need of public participation to be enhanced. The MCS also should do their role very well so that they can provide oversight role in their counties. And also the senators. Senators should be seen also going around and also educating people and inform people of what is going on, not only here in Nairobi, not only in the Senate. They should also go around and visit people. And where there is problems, they should also come to the rescue. Like in my constituency, I have stayed for a long time, and my senator has not come. I don't know why. But I have seen him recently going to Tiati over allocation of food, and I want to call upon him also to visit Baringo South and say what I have been requesting government about food. I appreciate what the government is doing right now. We still need that support. I support this Division of Revenue Bill 2019. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, let's have Honorable Mutemi. You have to use the next one, Honorable Muriungi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose this bill for the simple reason that, to me, it looks very pedestrian, it is routine, and it's like a dream. Even the chair of the budget committee which prepared this division of revenue bill does not look serious. He is hovering around the chamber. At one point he has walked away, and yet we are debating a very serious bill which he has presented in the chamber. And I wish he was listening to me. You can see he doesn't even He's a member of Tanga team.
Honorable Muriungi, we don't know what that is in this house.
I withdraw that particular word.
Proceed. I guess the chair is consulting.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allocating the 10 billion to counties, 47 counties is peanuts. When I do some little arithmetic, I get an allocation of about 6 billion shillings per county. 6 billion shillings in a county like mine, which is poor, is nothing. It's peanuts. It will do nothing. And therefore, I would have wished this committee would have divided the revenue equitably. National government gets 50%, and county government gets an 50%, although I know they are following the constitution, but I think something needs to be done because this money, in accordance with the spirit of the constitution, in creating a devolution, was to devolve development and the services to the county. So far, it has not been failed 5 years down the line. And Mr. Speaker, what we have done now, instead of devolving development and services to the counties, we have devolved corruption. Some counties have become conduits of corruption. We've heard of some counties which have constructed tarmac roads. We have also heard of counties which have free medical health care. We've heard of counties which have constructed value addition factories. But it is also regrettable, Mr. Speaker, that some counties have nothing to show 5 years down the line. For example, in my county, 1 year and a half after the current government has taken over in that county, roads are impassable. There's nothing has been done. Yet, I'm being told here in this parliament to allocate more money to that county. There is no significant infrastructure which is visible in the county. When we ask the governor, he says that his projects are software. I don't know what software is, what software is in a county. What I want to see is a road. I want to see a market. I want to see a machine, a scanner in the hospitals and all that, but not software. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I wished devolution in counties can be equated to devolution in NGCDF, because what we see, most of the developments down in the villages is what the CNDF has been able to do. And I wished this money would have been allocated to members of parliament instead of governors, because governors, their stomachs have become too big. Some of them are now diarrhea, and it's unfortunate that we are being asked to pass all this money. In my view, Mr. Speaker, because I've heard the chair saying that we allocate money to senators for oversight, I wonder who is in a better position to oversight the counties between the senator and the MCA. The MCA is closer to the people than the senator. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I do not support money going to senators for oversighting counties. I would want money being given to MCS, a lot of it, to oversight their wards so that they can see what the governor is doing in their wards. The senators should be busy oversighting the governors in Nairobi. You can see, Mr. Speaker, the chairman is not serious with this thing. Mr. Speaker, the chair of budget, you know, I heard him saying that he has gotten a tarmac road in Kino in his presentation. And you know, we are here discussing about devolving money when actually some MPs are benefiting from this money and others are not benefiting. I want a tarmac road in my constituency, Mr. Speaker. And I don't see it in this division of revenue bill, whereas the chairman has spoken about a road in his constituency. Mr. Speaker, the Article 10 of the Constitution provides for public participation. I have been in this parliament now for almost 1.5 years. have never been called for public participation on money allocated to the county government. I don't know who participates in that public participation, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, money being allocated to county government is being allocated to be spent at the discretion of the governor, with no reference to the main stakeholder. And the main stakeholder in the county is actually the member of parliament, the senator, and the women rep. But they are never consulted. And therefore, I think we are being used as a conduit to siphon money to be stolen by the county government. I've heard about conditional grants which have been given to the county government. Those conditional grants, like in my county, the roads which are being constructed in the county are only being constructed in the main shopping center at the end quarters of the county. It does not reach the villages. It does not reach the shopping centers which are in dire need of development. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of wastage of government resources, and I wished when the budget committee is preparing this budget, they also look at merit. They reward counties based on performance, not just dividing money and taking it to the counties. We have had a lot of money. Now we are talking about money being stolen for dams when Kenyans are dying of hunger for lack of water. We have heard about the NY scam, SGR. I've also read about a tender scandal at Kenya. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we have to be very careful when we are passing this money. We cannot be used as a rubber stamp to devolve money to be stolen. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, because I can see my time is over, I therefore don't want to be party to theft, and therefore I oppose vehemently this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Nyoro Didi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. And I rise to support this motion by the able chair of Budget Committee. And Mr. Speaker, I have to say, and even commend the committee I sit, that is Public Accounts Committee, because it is because of the report of PAC that now we are able to get a new amount in terms of the shareable revenues, Mr. Speaker, and especially the monies that goes to our devolution units or devolved units in the name of counties. And Mr. Speaker, I want to dwell much of my contribution around on how we use the county money and even how we spend the national revenues, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, I have listened to many members and I concur with them that over 70% of the money that we take to our counties, Mr. Speaker, most of this money goes actually to recurrence. And when you talk about recurrence, Mr. Speaker, most of this money, again, of the 70%, goes into paying salaries for the many workers that are based in our county governments, Mr. Speaker, and our counties. And Mr. Speaker, if you analyze these officers and the workers and the people and the employees of our county, Mr. Speaker, I dare say, Mr. Speaker, without blinking of an eye, that most of these workers are actually a product of patronage, Mr. Speaker. And the reason why we have a ballooning workforce, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the national government and also in the counties, Mr. Speaker, is because most of the employment that happens in most developed economies like Kenya, and we have trickled down the same to our counties, Mr. Speaker, is because employment is never based on need, Mr. Speaker. And employment of any expertise is not based on demand. Most of employment that happens in our country, in the national level, and also in our counties, Mr. Speaker, is purely a product of patronage, and especially when we talk about our governors, and up here also when we talk about the executive. And Mr. Speaker, most of this patronage is based actually on keen selection. That is nepotism, Mr. Speaker. And I dare say in most of our counties, most of the people you find in these counties, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure they have also borrowed heavily from what happens also up here, is based on who knows who, and therefore the work and the positions that are created is not necessarily based on service. Most of it is based on creating a position for this on the other person. And Mr. Speaker, the other side of patronage that is bedeviling our counties is based on reciprocal altruism, Mr. Speaker, where now you campaign for this person and they have to scratch your back. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you and I can tell this House, if you are to do an audit for all the workforce that we have in our counties, Mr. Speaker, most of it is actually unnecessary and most of it is pure duplication. And even as you talk about duplication, Mr. Speaker, it is not purely an issue of county government singularly, but there is a lot of duplication when it comes to the devolved functions, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, in many counties, you find there is a person who is employed, for example, by the Ministry of Agriculture, who is overseeing the work of the national government in our counties and even in our sub-counties. But, Mr. Speaker, even our governors have the same kind of persons, Mr. Speaker, doing exactly the same roles. Mr. Speaker, I tend to believe as a country, we need to harmonize the workforce that is we have in our counties and streamline the same with what we have from the national government, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I believe in not just in the counties that I'm familiar with, but it cuts across. That, Mr. Speaker, we tell Kenyans that we devolved a function like healthcare, that we devolved a function like agriculture. But, Mr. Speaker, even from the committee that I sit, that is PAC, I can see billions of money that actually goes to the Ministry of Health up here in the national government, Mr. Speaker, yet we give all the functions and most of the functions to the devolved units, Mr. Speaker, in the name of counties. Mr. Speaker, maybe in future in this House, we need to clearly demarcate the functions that are purely devolved, Mr. Speaker, so that we do not have this issue of hide and seek, that we have some functions that we call shared functions, Mr. Speaker, and Wajiko down there, and the taxpayer down there may not actually know who to apportion blame when there is a hitch in service delivery. Mr. Speaker, a function like agriculture, we need to exclusively either devolve it, Mr. Speaker, or put it in the national government. Another case like health, Mr. Speaker, we need to clearly demarcate instead of having this kind of hide and seek of shared functions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have, and I have had many members talk about the youth polytechnics that we have in our many villages across our counties. And Mr. Speaker, these institutions can play a very critical role insofar as creating expertise, and especially for the many things that we are doing as a country, and also in the counties is concerned, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, some of these institutions are purely sleeping giants. You find polytechnics, some of them have actually the relevant equipment, Mr. Speaker, but you are not doing a lot of marketing down there, and especially counties, in terms of having critical mass of the people who are being trained by these polytechnics, Mr. Speaker. But also, Mr. Speaker, there is also the other case of underfunding of these facilities, Mr. Speaker, where you get people who can only be taught in theory. And some of these courses that are trained, Mr. Speaker, are very technical and practical. And therefore, it is not of any essence to take, for example, a person to learn masonry, to learn, for example, welding, in an institution that do not have the equipment, Mr. Speaker, that can impact technical and direct expertise to these students, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, the elephant in the room when it comes to counties and even the revenue allocation per county is actually the issue of how much we receive. And I'm talking especially on where I sit, like Murang'a County, and the many other densely populated counties, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, it is the voters who pay taxes. I mean, it is people who pay taxes. It is not kilometers. It is Kenyans by names who pay taxes, Mr. Speaker, who vote, Mr. Speaker. It is not the cows and the camels and the trees. It is the people. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I think we need to progressively evaluate the formula for revenue allocation when it comes to county and give more weight to what matters. And what matters in our country is the people, Mr. Speaker, and therefore the population of our counties needs to have a critical percentage when it comes to revenue sharing. Mr. Speaker, I don't find it to be equitable when we have a country or a county like Turkana, whose per capita allocation per voter is around 60,000, Mr. Speaker, compared to my county, Murang'a, whose per capita allocation per voter is, Mr. Speaker, less than or close to a tenth of that, Mr. Speaker, 10,000 shillings. Mr. Speaker, we need a formula that will harmonize and bring about equity in the monies that we allocate to our counties. I have also perused the report, Mr. Speaker, and I have seen that the counties by last financial year owed SMEs, who are the majority of the suppliers to our counties, a whopping 108 billion, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, probably this is one of the reasons why in our country there is a cash crunch. We seem to be doing well in terms of so many things, but there is no money in the pocket of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, we need to expedite, even from up here in Parliament probably, we need to make laws that can govern how we handle this issue of pending bills, Mr. Speaker, in our counties. Because, Mr. Speaker, we have it right, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the executive in the national level. But, Mr. Speaker, many suppliers, and especially small traders, are languishing when their money is being held by the national government, Mr. Speaker, in the name of pending bills. And also, as I wind up, we need a lot of consultations when it comes to grants and the monies that are given by other bodies like World Bank. And I'm citing this because, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, Honorable Didi. Honorable Oyo Onyango.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I had intended to speak to this motion, but unfortunately my machine has been malfunctioning. I just discovered now that all along you were never seeing me as waiting to be given an opportunity. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say that arising from the many speakers who have overtaken me, and they have spoken more or less the same things that I would have wished to cover, and given that the enthusiasm about this motion now going down, I suggest that the mover be called to reply. I suggest that the mover be called upon to reply, because we are merely repeating, and the enthusiasm is going down every minute. Yeah.
Very well, honorable members. Honorable Tobiko, you know, when a member arises and very well, honorable. That is appreciated, honorable Tobiko. But when a member rises and requests that that the mover be called to reply, I cannot make that decision. But I'll ask the House to really. So, honorable members, I would like to put the question that the mover be called to reply. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? Nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, you know, the Honorable Peris Tobiko, member for Kajiado East, is asking that I donate a minute, but she may be well aware, serving her second term, that when the Honorable Koyo asked that the mover be called to reply, I don't have that latitude to donate. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, I just wish to reply and thank the members who have contributed to this motion and this bill, Honorable Speaker. And as the Honorable Koyo has said, a lot of the issues that members have raised are similar, and I also wish to thank the Honorable Koyo for calling on the mover to reply. Honorable Speaker, I think instructively the calls by many members on our county governments to be more accountable with the funds that have been allocated to them, I think have been well articulated by members. Concerns over the drought issues and having agriculture as a devolved function, the issue to do with many of the devolved roads that were devolved, the unclassified roads that were devolved to the counties, are issues that members have raised. And Honorable Speaker, I do hope that even as this bill moves to the Senate will also play its rightful role, especially in providing meaningful oversight of our county funds. Honorable Speaker, also in reply, I would wish also to mention the issues that have been raised to do with an economy that is struggling, an economy where a lot of people are struggling, and a lot of SMEs around the country struggling because of the issue of pending bills. Honorable Speaker, just like it is in the national government, even for our county governments, pending bills constitute the first charge to their exchequers. And therefore, I want to also take this opportunity to ask our county governments to ensure that even as a budget for the next financial year, 2019-2020, they do prioritize the settling of all pending bills. Because many of the people who are supplying goods, many of the contractors who are working in projects across the country for our county governments are SMEs. And these SMEs also have been struggling to access credit from our banking sector. Honorable Speaker, you know, with the struggles to access credit, then you are advancing the little money that you have to county governments that are not paying. There are SMEs who have cried that they've been owed by county governments over the last 3 years, and their bills have not been settled. Therefore, we want to ask the county governments to ensure that all pending bills are settled at least at the beginning of the next financial year as the first charge to their exchequers when the new year begins. With that, Honorable Speaker, I thank all the members who have contributed, and I beg to reply.
Honorable members, on account of numbers at this time, we shall putting the question to that particular order, and that will be done in a subsequent time. It therefore follows, therefore, that the next order number, it follows, therefore, that order number 11 may not proceed because it is dependent on the decision of the House on order number 10. So that as well will be stepped down. The earlier communication by the Speaker is that order number 12 should as well be stepped down, and so we shall go with that. Next order.
Order number 13, motion, ratification of the revised constitution of the African Civil Aviation Commission.
Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. Honorable Barire, you are not the chair, are you?
Yes, I'm not the chair, Mr. Speaker, but the chair is absent, and I wish to request that you step down this particular motion until the next available day.
Well, in the circumstances, that is stepped down as well. Next order.
Order number 14, motion, report on an inspection visit to the Namanga 1 stop border post in Kajiado County.
The chairperson, Committee on Regional Integration.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to request that the same decision be made in regard to this particular motion as the chair of the committee is not available.
Well, what is your point of order, Honorable Ichungwa?
Chair, as much as I agree with the Chief Whip, who has just walked in and did not whip members. And besides whipping members, even her own chairs of committees are not in the House. I think, Chair, you need to pronounce yourself because these order papers are printed, actually available on the net the night before. So every chair of a committee knows what order of business is on the order paper, and I don't know why chairs of committees will not be in the house. And for us, we sit here all day, and you see the challenges we've had in moving on with order number 11, Chair, for obvious reasons. And therefore, I want to ask the Chief Whip, Majority Chief Whip, next time to ensure that she not only whips chairs, but also whips her members for House business not to stall on account of numbers.
Barire, what do you want to say to that?
Mr. Speaker, I hear what Honorable Ishongwa is saying, and it is noted only that if you look at order number 14, it's way down the order paper, and I had seen the chair here earlier, but from the look of things, we didn't look like we would get there. But I'll make sure tomorrow they are all here, the whole day, the whole afternoon.
And you know, Honorable Barire, even your other part of explanation it doesn't help, because to say that the order was way down and therefore they left, that is not satisfactory, because even if it is the last, they should be available, because the House, like in this circumstance, could as well reach to that order. But nevertheless, that is stepped down, so that it is scheduled at another time. Honorable members, there being no other business, the time being 6:28 p.m., this House started adjourned till Thursday, 21st March, 2:30 p.m.